Chapter 511. There was only one thought in Fujio's mind. The Almighty was indeed not easy to deal with. Fortunately, judging from his expression, he wouldn't think of her as a girl for the time being. Before Qin Mo blocked Lin Feng, he glanced at Fujio again. The warning in his eyes was very obvious. Lin Feng was still tiptoeing as he watched. He wanted to see who was so charming that his captain actually kissed him. He was stopped by the captain just like that. Lin Feng stuttered, Captain, just now why did you? Qin Mo was very calm. The company arranged it. It must be Feng Yi's idea. Therefore, whether it was Lin Feng or Yun Hu, they all looked toward Manager Feng. Feng Yi opened his mouth, thinking that the company only allowed you to invite dances. Did they allow you to kiss? He wouldn't take the blame for this, not at all. But Lin Feng wasn't stupid. Every year, the captain wouldn't agree to the company's arrangement. Why did he agree to it this year? Qin Mo also knew what he wanted to say. He raised his hand to look at the watch on his wrist. He put one hand in his pocket and looked very indifferent. It's 3 minutes past midnight. I have to go back. If you have any questions, you can ask Feng Yi directly. As the manager of the Qin Club, he should know how to deal with this kind of situation. He will tell you everything you want to know. When Qin Mo said this, he looked at Feng Yi. Manager Feng was speechless. After being reminded by the Almighty, he realized that there were still a lot of fans here. Especially when there were a lot of fans. An Almighty like Qin Mo would definitely think of a lot of unexpected things. One thing happened. It was originally very simple. But when the fans saw it, it wouldn't be simple anymore. For example, who was that woman? Why did Almighty Qin kiss her? And so on and so forth. So Feng Yi's eyes turned and he revealed his most gentle smile. It was indeed arranged by the company as a fan benefit to give back to everyone. In fact, there had always been benefits. It was just that the Almighty never cooperated with some that crossed his bottom line. Why did he do it this time? Would he kiss someone? Looking at the back of that tall figure leaving. It wasn't only Feng Yi who thought so. Wu Jin had the same idea. When she saw that scene, her body was almost swaying. Something changed in his heart. She had been begging for so many years, but she had not gotten it. If that woman just now could give the opportunity to her, would the one who was kissed become her? Even if he didn't, at the very least it would not be like this. Wu Jin really couldn't understand why she was attending this masquerade party. She couldn't understand why she had done so much. Why didn't that person respond to her? Sister Wu. Han Susu looked at her worriedly. Wu Jin didn't reply. Han Susu only felt that the other party's gaze was very scary. But in the next second, Wu Jin chuckled lightly. So playing games is more of a sacrifice than being a police officer. For the sake of the company, you have to sacrifice your kiss. When Han Susu heard this, she immediately said, if it wasn't for the welfare, Big Brother Qin wouldn't even touch them. Chapter 512. Feng Yi didn't do everything well this time. Since it's a club, it's only through the fans' financial resources that Supreme Alliance can develop. Wu Jin thought that perhaps it was because of this reason that some people without the most basic upbringing were able to sneak in. Han Susu sneered. I don't know what you're thinking. Didn't you say spending money isn't important? What's more important is the support. When they say these words, Lin Feng stood beside the two of them. When he heard the last sentence, he glanced up, his expression indifferent. You really don't understand. In this world, there are always things more important than money. You mean you don't love money? Han Susu wasn't a stranger to Lin Feng. Then why is the Lin family still in business? Lin Feng smiled like a cherry blossom. My career has never conflicted with my beliefs. I don't know why you don't understand that feeling. Nothing is more important than the people by your side when you thought you couldn't walk out of it. Because I've fallen before, I know better than anyone else. When everyone says Supreme Alliance might not be able to make it, those who are more worried about Supreme Alliance's results than me, those who use their meager but powerful strength to support us forward, those who come to watch us compete even if they have to eat instant noodles, those who spend all their pocket money just to buy a ticket, telling us that even if Supreme Alliance isn't as strong as before, they won't leave. Those who are more determined than us that Supreme Alliance will definitely win the National League. Shouldn't we invite them the most? Lin Feng's words caused the entire place to sink into silence. Yin Wuyao held the cigarette in his mouth, breaking into a smile. Yes, shouldn't they be the ones we should invite the most? He had never been so thankful that he was back. Except for the little captain. Everyone had their own bottom line and principles. This was Supreme Alliance. Han Susu was at a loss for words. Wu Jin's gaze was heavy. Not because of anything else. Instead, some people were already looking over at them. Even though no one said anything. Someone immediately posted Lin Feng's words on the official Weibo account. There were only a few words in the title. I have never regretted being your fan. In fact, after Feng Yi saw that official Weibo post, his vague worries were dispelled. He couldn't guarantee that no one would take a video of Qin Imo kissing her. If it was filmed, that would definitely cause a stir on the internet. This was obviously disadvantageous to Supreme Alliance. Even if there was no video, as long as someone said so, the media would grab hold of the topic and keep expanding it. Now that Lin Feng had spoken the truth, all the dangers had been resolved. Nothing was more powerful than a true love powder. They were always silent. Be there when you need me most. Hence, Lin Feng's post was reposted many times that day. But there was one thing. Almighty Qin was really not right this time. Feng Yi was curious and worried. However, who was the woman kissed by Almighty Qin? Why couldn't he find out which fan she was? He was the one who personally sent out the invitations. Unless that person was... Chapter 513. Feng Yi was frightened by his own thoughts. And he was terrified. First, he took a deep breath and told himself to calm down. Don't always let your imagination run wild. Maybe it was just someone who sneaked in. Bullshit. Feng Yi had hired a professional to investigate in order to avoid harassment from the media. That was why people without an invitation couldn't enter. But if it was a fan, he or she would have his or her online nickname and dress characteristics. He or she would have to submit the form first before being allowed to attend. But there was no record of that person. And this year the team member was going to dress as a girl. Little Spade. Feng Yi's fingers paused. Then he thought it wouldn't be strange if it was Little Spade. Almighty Qin had always been indulgent towards Little Spade. No, that wasn't right. What did he mean by it wouldn't be strange if it was Little Spade? They were two men. Feng Shang saw that his brother seemed to be a little dizzy and thought he had drunk too much, so he came over to help him. Brother, what's wrong with you? Feng Shang, listen to me, don't dress as a girl in the future, understand? Feng Yi's face was serious. Baby Feng was stunned and immediately said, I am a manly man, I won't dress as a girl. Your idol is more manly than you, but he still wore it. After wearing it, he was kissed by Almighty Qin. Wait a minute, when Almighty Qin said he was going back, he was simply helping Little Spade out of trouble, right? After thinking it through, everything seemed to be like a thread, inextricably linked together. Including why Almighty Qin appeared in the hotel's surveillance room, Feng Yi suddenly understood everything. He probably locked onto Little Spade and confirmed it. In other words, after watching the video and confirming who Little Spade was. That was why Almighty Qin agreed to participate in the Lights Out event at midnight this time? Feng Yi's eyes changed when he thought of this. It was fine if it was a CP. But, if Almighty Qin was really gay. Feng Yi could almost imagine the chaos that would ensue after others knew this secret. Not only Little Spade, but even Almighty Qin would be defeated by those who said they liked him. It wasn't because they did anything wrong. Even if Almighty Qin was the young master of the Qin group, he would be forced to give up the esports industry in the face of the storm of the internet. So today's matter. He couldn't say. Feng Yi finally understood why Almighty Qin reminded him before he left. As the manager of Supreme Alliance, he would keep this secret to himself forever, burying it in his heart. But Almighty Qin and Little Spade, what was going on between them? Were they really going to be together? I won't. This was Qin Mo's reply. No one knew that when he walked to the side door of the hotel, his emotions were churning in the depths of his eyes. He was straight, there was no doubt about it. Because he had no interest in having the same body as himself. However, he didn't understand why he couldn't control himself at that moment. In fact, she even wanted more. That was why he had the youth wait for him here. It was to confirm it again. Tell the guy to put his clothes back on. Let's confirm it again. Fujio was still wearing that black chiffon dress, but this time she was smoking. Since there was no one around, she decided to take off her mask as well. Holding the cigarette between her fingers, she lowered her head and smoked. In the midst of the smoke, her half-closed eyes were faintly discernible, as if her facial features had been kissed by God. Chapter 514. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed when he saw this. He strolled over, took out his hand from his trouser pocket, took Fujio's cigarette and put it on his thin lips. Fujio looked up and smiled. Look at me, I'm so obedient. You don't have a car, right? Qin Mo held the car key and said calmly, you can drive later. Put on the mask first. The reason why he said this was because when he looked at this face, Chinamo had a feeling that he wanted to destroy something. Fujio clenched her fingers and smiled. No, I'm underage. Underage can climb over walls but not drive. Chinamo raised his eyebrows. Fujio sighed. Brother Amo, you can't keep poking at my wounds just because you kissed me wrongly. I said it was me but you didn't listen and kissed me. Fujio thought about it just now. The Almighty was a straight man and he couldn't accept this kind of thing. After all, the Almighty didn't recognize her at that time. After hearing Fujio's words, Chinamo reached out his hand and flicked that guy's head. He said calmly, "You're too slow. It's just a kiss, it's nothing." Fujio hooked up her lips. "If you feel uncomfortable, you can find a girl to kiss." Hearing this, Chinmo's eyes dimmed completely. This time he didn't say anything. After turning around, he said to Fujio, "Let's go." That voice sounded like it was mixed with fog, and there was an undetectable loneliness in it. At that moment, Fujio thought she heard it wrong. How could that person be lonely? She paused, then paced to catch up. Chinamo seemed to be suppressing something. After opening the door, he took out a bottle of water, opened the cap and took a sip. Then he closed it again and threw it into the car casually. "Get in." This was Chinmo's second sentence. There was still some distance from the dance party to the city center. The main thing was that it wasn't easy to walk at night in Rivertown. The haze was so thick that visibility was very low. Fujio didn't know if the Almighty felt that he had kissed a boy, so he couldn't accept it and was preparing himself mentally. But at this moment, no one seemed to have the time to care about the fact that Chinamo had drunk and was driving, because Chinmo's indifference was so obvious. As a result, when Fujio wiped her lips again, he suddenly opened his mouth and warned, "Wipe it again. Do you believe that Big Brother will teach you again what it means to kiss?" Fujio tilted her head, looked at that handsome and noble face, and thought that he really couldn't accept it. But it was her fault if she rubbed it. If the Almighty hadn't bitten her so hard, her upper lip wouldn't be so numb and swollen. She listened to a certain someone muttering to herself. Chinmo's eyes warmed up a little. But when it warmed up to a certain extent, his deep gaze landed on the upper lip that someone was talking about. Then it slowly moved downwards, revealing a beautiful curve. Of course, Fujio noticed his gaze. Her heart skipped a beat. However, there was a faint smile on his face. "Do you feel that you're very real? If Lin Feng hadn't given me these disguises, I didn't know how many people would have recognized me." Chinamo didn't speak. He slowly narrowed his eyes, and there was an indescribable danger. But at this moment. Chapter 5:15. Under his palms, the delicate softness could be felt even through a layer of cloth, with a faint fragrance of warm jade. Chinmo's body paused, his Adam's apple moved and he glanced to the side. But he couldn't control himself. Because of this softness, all the heat in his body rushed into one place. That feeling was crazy. But a certain guy was still smiling, evil and handsome. Touch it and see if it feels good. It's so realistic that it can fool some otakus. If Chinamo had had a woman, he definitely wouldn't be so passive. But Fujio was betting on the Almighty's long-term indifference to women. He wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a real and a fake one. Any man would know that. What did Chinamo feel at that moment? He stopped the car by the side of the road, and when he glanced over, he saw that person raising her eyebrows at him with a light smile. Her thin lips were slightly red, and her eyes were watery. She was no different from a vixen walking in the night. Chinamo didn't think and pinched Fujio's chin. He lowered his face and his eyes deepened. "If you don't want to be pressed under me right now, be good." Fujio paused. Her fingers stopped Chinmo's movement. But the man's wrist was hard and strong. She felt like she was holding a piece of hot iron, hard and burning. Her heart skipped a beat. Chinamo looked at her expression and took his hand back. His voice was as calm as water. "Get out of the car if you do such a perverted thing again." "You didn't notice?" Fujio curled her lips. She knew when to stop. But this time the sacrifice was a little too big. Not only did she lose her first kiss, but she also had to take the initiative to let the Almighty F***ck her. Now, in the Almighty's mind, she was probably a person with no morals. So, it wasn't good to have too much dark history. For example, if she provoked the Almighty again. The Almighty would definitely throw her out of the window, a source of pollution. She had already driven out. The Almighty had already tolerated her to a certain extent. In the end, it was all because of that lights-out operation at midnight. A kiss that shouldn't have happened. When the Almighty saw her in the future, would he remember that he kissed a boy, and want to get even with her? Then she would lose all her advantages as a younger brother. Speaking of which, why did the Almighty care so much about that kiss? Could it be? Fujio looked up. Brother Mo, don't tell me that was also your first kiss. Even if he wasn't close to women, he should at least kiss a girl during puberty. After all, the Almighty looked like a man with endless peach blossoms. If he stood there, there would definitely be girls wanting to kiss him. For example, Christmas Eve or Valentine's Day. But the facts proved that the man's cold gaze confirmed Fujio's thoughts. No, Brother Mo, what did you do in school? Could it be that top students were destined to be different from slackers like them who only read books and never fell in love? The Almighty didn't seem like such an obedient person. Also, the last time she saw the Almighty fight with the second middle students, he looked like a boss. In addition, Fujio had visited number 1 middle school's Chieba before. There were still remnants of the Almighty's achievements when he was the school hunk of number 1 middle school. It was said that he was the boss of the area. Even the second high school would take a detour when they saw him. Did such a person really have a first kiss? Chapter 5:16. Fujio. She just wanted to know when the Almighty would get over the fact that he had kissed a boy by mistake and stop mentioning her dark history. But Fujio didn't know what Chin-mo was thinking at this moment. The fog outside the car was still thick. Chin-mo's hand that was turning the steering wheel still felt that soft, jade-like touch. He couldn't concentrate at all. He wanted to press that guy under his body, and he even wanted to do it. Chin-mo's fingers tightened, and the speed of the car was affected. Someone who was willing to let him do it with her couldn't be a girl. But he never thought that he would have such thoughts about a boy one day. He suddenly realized that his palm was addicted to that feeling. Warm and soft. It passed through the clothes to his hand like some kind of temptation. Chin-mo's Adam's apple moved imperceptibly. He parked the pure black Hummer on the side of the road. The Fu family's villa was just ahead. Change back into your clothes. These short words made Fujio pause again. Here. There's only you and me in the car, you can't see from the outside. As Chin-mo said this, he lowered his head and took out a cigarette. Then he tilted his head and lit it up. He leaned against the steering wheel and raised his eyebrows slightly. Fujio chuckled calmly. I didn't bring any clothes. Brother Mo, take them off and give them to me? There's a set of casual clothes I brought behind you. Chin-mo's voice was very calm. Fujio's fingers paused. No need to be so troublesome, it's just in front. Change back. Chin-mo took a drag of his cigarette, and his handsome face was vaguely visible under the flashing headlights. He chuckled again. You were just acting like a hooligan, what are you afraid of? Fujio didn't move. She just said lazily, I don't want to change. Then you can get out of the car whenever you want to change. Chin-mo held the cigarette between his fingers and extinguished it. He locked all the car doors and smoked casually, looking noble and abstinent. Fujio knew that the Almighty always did what he said. She really couldn't wear this with the Almighty all the time. It was a short time and it was at night. If it was in the daytime. Even if she acted like a hooligan just now, the Almighty wouldn't have all his doubts. Therefore he couldn't stay here any longer. The Almighty must have been angry at her because he had kissed the wrong boy just now. That was why he had asked her to change. However, even if he could do it in the car, he couldn't do it in the front seat. Taking advantage of the fact that there were no cars passing by and nothing could be seen in the car, she jumped into the back seat and put on a pair of long pants and a sweater. As long as she was fast enough, it should be fine. Fujio looked up. Chin-mo spoke up, his voice calm. Do you need to think for so long just to change your clothes? So he hadn't completely eliminated his suspicions about her? Fujio raised her eyebrows and unbuckled her seatbelt. Using her left hand as a support, she twisted her body, bent over, and jumped into the back seat handsomely. The interior of the Hummer was spacious, so Fujio didn't feel any pressure when she did these movements. Instead, she looked very cool. She picked up the garment bag and pulled out a pair of trousers, then a sweater. Under the complete darkness, the rustling of the cloth would seem especially loud. Fujio changed clothes 3 to 4 times faster than ordinary people. It was because she was good at pretending. Chapter 5:17. There were only the two of them in the Hummer. This feeling made his throat a little dry. He wanted to relax. With a cigarette between his fingers, he tried his best not to look behind him, especially at the sound of clothes rubbing against each other. Instead, he tilted his head back slightly and looked at the haze outside the car. For some reason, the scene of this guy cross-dressing at the ball appeared in front of his eyes again. White legs, beautiful collarbones, and a pair of watery eyes. Chin-mo didn't want to think too much, so he simply looked back. He just happened to see the youngster's waist. That white, smooth, and curvature from trying to put on a sweater was breathtaking. An uncontrollable thought came out of Chin Mo's chest, drowning all the feelings he knew. An indescribable heat rose from his lower abdomen, and that heat spread to every muscle. Even the hand that was holding the cigarette paused heavily. At that moment he even wanted to let the youngster sit on his lap without wearing anything. Or he wanted to take off all his clothes in the car and teach him a lesson. He wanted to teach him a lesson until his watery eyes were really watery. The clearer the thought, the more uncontrollable the turbulence. In the chaos, Chin Mo was very clear that his desire was different from that of any ordinary person. Because ordinary people wouldn't have such a strong desire for a boy who had the same body structure as them. Chin Mo closed his eyes heavily. When he opened them again, it was already quiet. When Fujio turned around, she found that the other party was staring at her. That kind of concentrated gaze made Fujio's heart tighten. She tried to control her breathing and curled up the corner of her mouth. Did the Almighty find out? That was the worst-case scenario. But even so, Fujio liked to bide her time. A Mercedes flashed by outside the Hummer, and the headlights shone in. The two of them stared at each other in silence. She didn't know how long it had been. Fujio heard that pleasant and indifferent male voice say, "I'll send you back." Okay. Fujio smiled slowly. That meant that he didn't find out. But it was impossible. She changed her clothes very quickly. Plus, the visibility in the car was very low. The Almighty didn't turn on the interior lights and there was a haze outside. Even if he did, he could only look at the back. At the end of the day, the Almighty wasn't in a good mood because he was unhappy that he kissed a boy. Fujio understood. After all, the Almighty was a straight man, so he must be very conflicted. It was one thing to respect everyone's sexual orientation, but if the Almighty was involved, he would definitely feel uncomfortable. What's more, that was the Almighty's first kiss. In the Almighty's heart, she was undoubtedly the culprit. Fujio felt that she had to explain this matter. "Brother Mo, when your female confidant asked me to dance with you, I really wanted to give her the chance to dance with you. Although she didn't like that person's attitude. But at that time all she wanted to do was hide from the Almighty." But Fujio didn't know that after her explanation, Chin Mo's gaze turned colder. He unlocked the car on the right. "We've reached your house, get out." At this moment, Fujio also noticed Chin Mo's unhappiness. Perhaps today was indeed not a suitable day for the two of them to chat. After Fujio went down, he sped up. Chapter 518. Fujio looked at the Hummer disappearing into the night and rubbed her sweater with her fingers. She hoped that the Almighty would return to normal when they met tomorrow. Otherwise it would be too depressing to attend this masquerade party. After leaving the Fu family, Chin Mo didn't go home directly. Instead, he stepped on the accelerator and sped all the way to a place he wasn't keen on before. Pure Color. A famous nightclub. The panoramic glass building was overflowing with color and was extremely luxurious. There were countless luxury cars slowly entering the city, especially on a day like today. However, no car could compare to a military Hummer with a red and white license plate. It smoothly stopped in front of the gate. When people saw the license plate, they were immediately shocked. One of the reception managers quickly called their boss Jiang. But boss Jiang seemed to be in a bad mood these days. This was especially true after his birthday. Could it be that boss Chin was here to drink with boss Jiang? The reception manager could only think so. Chin Mo got out of the car with a pair of slender and strong legs. The other girls who got out of the car couldn't help but look in his direction. He was still wearing the clothes from the masquerade party. The lines of the devil's uniform outlined his perfect waistline. His chestnut black hair slightly covered his eyes, making it hard to see his expression. However, it was this abstinence and noble temperament that made people forget to go home. Gosh, who is he? He's so handsome. You don't even know him? That young Master Chin of Jiang City. Why haven't I seen him before? Young Master Chin? Of course you haven't seen him before. He doesn't come often. Today is a feast for your eyes and luck with women? The girls looked at each other and smiled. Then they walked in. It was like this in the nightclub. Everyone could talk to each other and treat each other to drinks. Even some girls, if they liked someone and had money, would ask the waiter to give them a dozen drinks. So, the nightclub was a place that didn't create distance. It was also a place where Ong Nightstand was flourishing. After all, they were all adults. They were very attracted to this kind of hormone attraction. But no one knew when it started, but there were many high school students in the nightclub. Perhaps this was the change of times. Because some high school students were richer than adults, they knew how to squander and enjoy themselves. Qin Mo's looks were lethal to anyone, let alone girls who were experiencing their first awakening of love. Seeing Pure Color's manager leading the way personally, some of the young ladies' eyes lit up even more. On this day, some of the girls who came to Pure Color were looking for opportunities to interact with Qin Mo. One of the girls couldn't take it anymore. She came from a rich family. She drank the wine and smiled lightly. If you guys aren't going, I will. Someone like Qin Mo should be more proactive. Are you crazy? The girl's friend held her back. However, the girl didn't think much of it. I'm not bad looking, you idiot. No man can push away a woman who tries to get close to him. What are you worried about? Did you know that a while ago, someone tried to drug young Master Qin, but nothing was done? In the end, he never appeared in Pure Color again. Let me give you a piece of advice, don't go. The Qin family was, after all, a warlord. No matter how handsome and elegant Qin Mo was, he was ruthless. Chapter 519. The girl smiled, not taking it seriously. I'm not going to drug you, I'm just going to express my feelings. I'm still young and have some fun, understand? Maybe I'll sleep with you. Seeing that he couldn't stop her, the friend kept quiet. Some things didn't make sense because of their different views. That girl was indeed beautiful and looked very pure. She should not be old. Sometimes men like this type of girl. This gave the girl a high level of confidence. Her face was still flushed. She stood in front of Qin Mo and smiled. The way she squinted her eyes made her look like a cat. Qin Mo looked at her, his gaze a little dazed. Seeing this, the girl grabbed Qin Mo's collar, probably wanting to kiss him. After all, from young Master Qin's gaze, it was obvious that he wanted something. What she didn't expect was that the other party didn't even give her a chance to get close to him. He directly took a step back. The girl paused for a moment, and a layer of tears appeared in her eyes. Qin Mo didn't have any intention of stopping. He said to the person beside him, "Get rid of her." Yes. The manager in charge of reception was really helpless. These people knew young Master Qin didn't like it. Why did they do it? The girl felt wronged. She didn't do anything. She rushed over and hugged Qin Mo's waist. "Young Master Qin, I was wrong. Give me a chance. I just like you." The same softness pressed against his back. But he didn't feel any impulse. There was even an indescribable sense of disgust. This time, Qin Mo didn't maintain his most basic etiquette, his eyes turning cold as he said two words, "Scram." "Young Master Qin." The girl's beautiful eyes were filled with tears. She didn't believe that a man could be so cold-blooded. But Qin Mo was just that cold-blooded. Even when he glanced at the reception manager, his gaze was cold. The manager knew he had been careless and hurriedly asked the bodyguards to throw him out. So when Jiang Zuo appeared, the first sentence he said was to tease Qin Mo. "These beauties, they can't act coquettishly to anyone, but they have to act coquettishly to a person without emotions and desires like you." Qin Mo didn't say anything. He took the red wine, pulled out the cork and poured it into the wine glass beside him. Then he lifted his head. He finished the glass. His side profile was handsome and quiet. Soon Jiang Zuo realized something was wrong. What's the situation? Qin Mo's dark eyes didn't reveal any emotions. He sat on the sofa lazily and tugged at his tie. What would you think if a boy was too pretty? Jiang Zuo was smart. When he heard that, his fingers froze and he turned towards Qin Mo. He had a premonition that what Qin Mo was going to say next would definitely become a secret that only the two of them would know. "I want that guy." Qin Mo tilted his head like a vampire noble from the darkness. "I really want to." The thing that Jiang Zuo was most worried about had happened, but he couldn't help but ask, "Is that Fujio? Is it that obvious?" Qin Mo lit a cigarette and lit it. The surrounding temperature dropped several degrees because of his words. "But that guy treats me very normally." Jiang Zuo opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Qin Mo was the only one in the Qin family. Chapter 520. It's different now. Qin Mo exhaled a puff of smoke. Through the clear smoke, Jiang Zuo couldn't understand why he felt a hint of sadness in Qin Mo's eyes. Jiang Zuo took another sip and thought for a moment. It might be an illusion. After all, you haven't been in a relationship and don't frequent these places like me. Sometimes, when you spend too much time with someone, you might feel possessive. It's not just possessive. Qin Mo glanced over at him. When I saw that guy in female clothes, I couldn't help but kiss him. Do you think it's an illusion? Jiang Zuo frowned. Female clothes? Maybe that's the main point. You are interested in girls, that's why you have such a reaction. Qin Mo glanced at the cigarette between his fingers. Is that so? Jiang Zhua nodded. At this moment, Qin Imo suddenly laughed, but there wasn't a hint of warmth in his eyes. Instead he was like a devil, his voice slow. Do you know what I was thinking when a girl hugged me in the front hall? I was thinking that if that guy came to the nightclub and was seduced like that, those girls should go to hell. With that he took a puff, his gaze dark. Because he can only be mine. Jiang Zhua watched Qin Mo's expression, his heart thumping. What about him? Compared to me he dotes on your sister more. They were together the entire day yesterday, what do you think? Qin Mo's voice was calm, so calm that it didn't seem like his usual self. Jiang Zhua, if there's a guy who doesn't care about a girl's looks and figure but is gentle to her, that means he really likes her. Do you understand? From the start Shui Yaoyao was different to him. Jiang Zhua stood up abruptly. No. Qin Imo glanced up at him. What do you mean no? From the start I was the one who was nice to the chubby girl. When Jiang Zhua said this he changed his usual flirtatious demeanor. His peach blossom eyes were filled with indignation. But the moment he finished his sentence, he paused immediately. Qin Imo glanced at him. I see. What? So that's how it is. Jiang Zhua sat back down and smiled lightly. Don't overthink things. I don't have any feelings for that fat chick like you do for Fujio. But I just don't understand. Didn't I treat her well in the past? She missed me but I didn't let her go. She knew that I didn't want my dad to remarry, but when her mom asked for her opinion she said she agreed. Qin Imo extinguished the cigarette in his hand. Are you happy that she doesn't miss you now? What right does she have to be unfilial just because she says so? Jiang Zhua narrowed his eyes. Don't worry, it's impossible between her and Fujio. I have a way to deal with her. Qin Imo glanced at him. Regardless of what your plan is, don't hurt anyone. Of course, if you simply want to stop them from being together, I will provide you with all my support. Who do you think I am? Jiang Zhua smiled. Fortunately, I have something that can threaten that fat chick. You can't go back on your word after sleeping with him. Qin Imo raised his eyebrows and didn't continue speaking. In fact, he wasn't worried about Shui Yaoyao. But that fellow didn't care about him at all. Otherwise he wouldn't have asked him to find a girl to try kissing. As long as he thought about this. Chapter 521. A masquerade party changed a lot of things. However, some people didn't notice the change. They didn't even know if it was good or bad. Just like when Qin Imo left, Jiang Zhua said, think about it. Maybe if you don't contact each other for 2 days, everything will be normal. Your circle isn't suitable for this kind of relationship. If you are just the heir of the Qin group, you can ignore everything and no one will pay attention to you. But you still have to compete, right? Qin Imo stood up and put out the cigarette. Help me get a room, I'll sleep here tonight. Jiang Zhua was shocked. Was he going to break the record of not sleeping outside for many years? Do you need me to send a girl, or a boy to you? Jiang Zhua suggested. Maybe it would be better if they moved. Qin Imo only said one word, dirty. It seemed like young Master Qin's misophobia still existed. He was relieved. And it was obvious that Qin Imo didn't have any special feelings for a boy. Which meant he hadn't turned gay. It was all because of too much contact. At this point, Jiang Zhua could only comfort himself and hope that things could change. Some people were destined to have insomnia tonight. Besides Jiang Zhua, there was another person who knew the secret, Feng Yi. After Qin Imo left, Feng Yi indirectly reminded everyone that everything that happened today was the company's reward for everyone. He hoped that everyone wouldn't share it and just treat it as tonight's secret. But the truth was, leaks were inevitable. Fortunately, someone only said, Almighty Qin kissed the mysterious witch on Tieba. No specific photos were posted. So it didn't cause much of a stir. But as a manager he had to pay attention to such things. And after Feng Yi found out that the person who was kissed was Fujio, he had to stop this news. In the online circle he knew very well that water could carry a boat or overturn it. These people were people who only wanted to play well in the competition. They couldn't be hindered by other factors. Even if those factors included the crazy love in the past, and then the incomprehensible fans turning into haters. Maybe it was time to establish a fan club for Spade Z. After daybreak he would ask Little Spade's opinion. Some things were fine as long as he knew it in his heart. There was no need to point it out. He hoped that the cross-dressing incident would be completely over. Because once someone dug it out, the consequences would be unthinkable. The night outside grew even darker. After taking a shower, Fujio took off her wig and returned to that lazy, dark and beautiful young man. She stuffed one hand into her trouser pocket and wiped her silver-gray hair with the other. She glanced sideways at the sweater and trousers on the wooden chair. I'll send it to the Almighty tomorrow. This kiss misunderstanding must be cleared up. I hope the Almighty's mom is here. Let's play hero together and liven up the atmosphere. At this thought, Fujio raised her eyes. In the mirror, her thin lips were still red, and they looked like they had been bitten. Today was indeed a dangerous day. If it wasn't for the kiss, the Almighty must have discovered her secret long ago. In fact, there was no collagen tool. Fujio reached out and touched her own softness. Her eyes were deep. Indeed, he should hurry up. The longer he stayed in this place, the more dangerous it would be. Thinking of this, Fujio opened her laptop and did her daily routine, which was to reconstruct the IP database. However, on this day, there was an email in her mailbox. Chapter 522. Fujio's fingers stopped typing. A hacker would always have a lot of emails, and no one would know about her emails, except for Ashino. Fujio was now sure that the figure she saw at the regional competition was not only familiar, but it was very likely to be him. She changed her IP address, and the email changed accordingly. Another email. Fujio's eyes flickered and she logged in with her IP address. Only then did she realize that a third of the emails had such an email. A third of the emails, nearly 1,000. 1,000? Fujio sat in front of the computer and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, it wasn't time yet. She had to wait for the national competition to end. Fujio looked up at the calendar hanging on the wall. There was still half a month. There was still half a month's time before everything here would end. But everything wouldn't be so peaceful. The night grew darker. Wu Jun lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Qin Imo kissing someone appeared in her mind. Who was that woman? Others didn't understand Qin Imo, but that didn't mean she didn't. She had liked him for so many years. She seemed to be watching his every move. When did that person care about the company's rules? The more she thought about it, the more Wu Jun felt that something was wrong. Moreover, the feeling of not getting what she wanted made her attribute it to the person who was kissed. Maybe she should investigate the other party's background. Wu Jun narrowed her eyes, sat up, and dialed her colleague's number. Hello, are you in charge of the security of the hotel in the suburbs of Nanjing District? No, nothing. I attended a party today and I feel that the security there isn't good, so I want to check the surveillance there. Okay, sure, I'll go with you tomorrow. Wu Jun was a police officer. It was indeed convenient for her to work in this industry. The next day, she changed into a police uniform and went to the hotel where the masquerade party was held with her colleague. At the end of the year, it was normal for the police to check on such things. Therefore, neither the hotel nor Wu Jun's colleague felt that there was anything wrong with Wu Jun's actions. The hotel was very cooperative. Once the manager heard that there was a security issue, he brought them to the surveillance room. However, the security guard in charge of this area was still puzzled. Why were there so many people who wanted to watch yesterday's footage? However, people were born with an instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. Generally, when they saw a policeman in uniform, they would not mention some small things. Hence, they didn't take the initiative to say that young Master Qin had seen the surveillance footage. Wu Jun wouldn't know either. However, there was one thing that was particularly strange. When they went back to take a look, the surveillance footage from yesterday had all disappeared. What? It's not out yet? Wu Jun asked from the side. The two security guards looked at each other and said cautiously, the surveillance seems to be broken. Spoiled? Wu Jun frowned. How could the surveillance device be spoiled? We're not sure either. The security guard guessed. It should be a problem with the system. Wu Jun didn't achieve her goal and her face turned cold. You are in this line of work. How can you not know this? The security guard fell silent. Chapter 523. Wu Jun shook her head. Of course, she wouldn't tell him why she was checking the hotel's surveillance cameras. That colleague had a good relationship with her. Even if she sensed that Wu Jun was acting weird today, she didn't say anything. After all, compared to them, Wu Jun's performance was much better. It was rumored that she would be promoted soon. It's true that things haven't been peaceful recently. The colleague smiled and said, It's normal for you to be so worried. You don't know, but I heard from the people in the General Investigation Department that a hacker who disappeared for half a year has appeared again. Now the higher-ups are warning us to be careful. That person used to be active in America, but this time he seems to have come to our country. Wu Jun heard her colleague's words and suddenly looked up. Is the hacker you mentioned called Z? I don't know the specifics. The colleague shook his head. You should ask the higher-ups about this kind of confidential information. With this answer, the first thing Wu Jin did when she returned to the police station was to apply for a transfer to the crime squad. The bureau chief's surname was Huang, and he was a big-bellied man. He was good at talking like an official. Hurry up, Miss Wu, hurry up and take a seat. I saw your application form, but you know how busy we are. We work day and night. Whenever we encounter a case, we don't even have time to sleep. If you come, I'm really worried that you won't be able to handle the intensity of the work. Wu Jin looked at him, her voice laced with displeasure. Director Huang, that person was here too. His status was higher than mine, so why aren't you worried that he wouldn't be able to handle the workload? Director Huang wanted to say, how can that be the same? That's a talent I have to provide for you. You don't really like their team, right? Wu Jin was smart, her voice calm. If you let me turn around, I'll bring that person along. Director Huang's fingers paused, then he smiled. That's impossible, he's no longer involved in cases. It depends on who says it and how they say it. Wu Jin is very confident about this. Director Huang wasn't one to make promises. Even though he was plump, his eyes were bright. Since that's the case, little Wu, invite China's best criminal psychologist back. Once he's back, the crime squad will host a welcome party for the both of you. There's no need for a welcome party. It's not like Director Huang doesn't know his personality. Wu Jin smiled. There's just one thing. Director Huang arched a brow. Speak. I heard some news that some places have suffered from cyber attacks recently. Could it be the Z that he wanted to catch back then? The Wu family was a businessman and Wu Jin knew how to exchange goods for goods. The smile on Director Huang's face disappeared. Who told you about this? Director Huang, you don't need to know how I know, just tell me if it's true or not. Director Huang placed his teacup down, placing his hands on his chest. That's right, based on his modus operandi, we suspect him to be the culprit. Modus operandi? Wu Jin arched a brow. I mean, how did you lock onto him? Director Huang remained silent. Wu Jin smiled. Let that person come back. There has to be a case that he's interested in. A message left behind after the cyber attack, Yi Zichen said. Director Huang pondered for a moment before pulling the drawer open. He took out a photo and passed it to Wu Jin. Wu Jin took the photo and saw the words, I'm back. Chapter 524. No. The thin sunlight shone down. The school was full of noise. For Fujio, school life was one round of exams after another. The final exam was after the new year. It was a pain in every high school student's heart. But it was also an excuse to find the Almighty. She could continue to ask the Almighty for help. But now Fujio was different from before. Even the handsome scene of the youngster twisting his neck in class would be posted on Tieba in the next second. Ah, my big spade is so handsome. He is still biting his pen. He looked so serious while doing the questions. Someone said that my big spade can climb over walls. He strongly requested a wall climbing picture. I suggest that everyone go to number 1 middle school and watch when he climbs over walls and takes pictures. I won't challenge him. I'm a chef, so I'm going to apply for a job in number 1 middle school's cafeteria. What does Big Spade want to eat? I'll give him 2 plates. Yes. No one knew why. Maybe it was because of the words Fujio said at the entrance of number 1 middle school when she was protecting He Honghua. Some of the aunties decided to become her fans. Of course, those aunties included Movie Queen and look, another photo of my son is posted on Tieba. This angle is so handsome. Movie Queen and showed her phone to Chin Mo, who was sitting next to her. Doesn't it look like the cat you had before? I didn't expect my Gio to be so obedient in school. He looks so cute when he writes with his head down. Chin Mo put down his chopsticks and wiped his hands with a piece of tissue. His smile was a little cold. Obedient? Good grades? That guy's physics grades are terrible. His mother may never know. Yes, obedient, handsome and cute. Movie Queen and looked at the photo and then at her son's handsome but cold side profile. My dream is to have a son like this, and I've been trying to guide you in this direction. Who knew? But it didn't matter. It was the same with Gio now. He was too fair. Secretary Liang heard this and started to look up at the sky, pretending to be busy. Chin Mo was about to say something when his phone rang in his pocket. It was a WeChat message. Brother Mo, is it convenient for me to go to your house for revision? Chin Mo looked at the screen, recalling Jiang's words. He placed his phone back into his pocket. Ever since that, Secretary Liang noticed that his CEO was a little absent-minded. His absent-mindedness lasted until the group meeting an hour later. He stood behind Chinamo and watched as his CEO picked up and put down his phone for the 7th time before picking it up again. His slender fingers slid across the screen as he replied, "Yes." When Fujio received the Almighty's WeChat message, she was standing in front of the school supermarket with a lollipop in her mouth. One hand was in her pocket and the other was typing. Her silver hair was down, and only the side of her face could be seen. "Have you heard? What? That person from Class A was called into Teacher Howe's office again. Her grades have been dropping a lot recently, so it's normal for Mr. Howe to call her. Why do I feel that something is strange?" Chapter 525. Shui Yaoyao came to the supermarket with Fujio, but Shui Yaoyao was the one who paid for the lollipops. Shui Yaoyao came out a little late because she had to pay the bill. However, it was obvious that Shui Yaoyao had heard the conversation. She looked up at Fujio and said hesitantly, "Actually, Your Highness Jio, I have a favor to ask of you." "Say it." Fujio took out the lollipop and threw it into the bin. "It didn't taste right." Shui Yaoyao glanced up. "I know the student from Class A they were talking about. I used to be in Class A too. She's always been under a lot of pressure in school. Her family is different from ours. Her mother cares about her grades a lot, but lately I keep feeling like something happened to her. She told me that she's afraid to come to school." Fujio raised her eyebrows and her eyes flashed. "Go on." Shui Yaoyao nodded. "That teacher likes to talk to her and doesn't give her any face. But even so, I don't think she'd want to commit suicide." Fujio suddenly stopped. "Suicide? Suicide is a bit too much. I mean, she seems to have some psychological problems recently. She always sends me WeChat messages late at night, saying that she doesn't want to live anymore." Shui Yaoyao held the phone she had just bought, her face full of worry. "I understand how she feels. If you hadn't appeared at that time, I wouldn't have been so brave, and I wouldn't have become who I am now." Fujio interrupted her. "Yaoyao, you have to believe that people are what they are. Your essence is there. Even without me you would have become who you are through other means. But your friend is a little strange. Can you show me your chat history?" "Yeah." Shui Yaoyao immediately swiped her phone open. "Some things are her privacy but these aren't." Fujio's eyes darkened as she read the conversation on the screen. Shui Yaoyao smiled bitterly. "She used to tell me everything, but now she feels like I betrayed her and I don't even care about her." I could understand how she felt. She was alone and not fated to help. Some people, after experiencing something, even if he had a lot of friends around him, will also be in the most need of a hug when all has been defeated. It seemed like there were some things that no one could understand no matter how he explained them. Thus, he decided not to say anything. More and more so. It became more and more silent. The more he fell silent, the more despair he felt. He couldn't see where his exit was. When Fujio saw those words, she turned her head and said in a faint voice, "Yaoyao, do you know?" "What?" Shui Yaoyao looked at him in confusion. Fujio looked at her. "Only those who are born in the dark can understand the thoughts of those who live in the dark." Yaoyao didn't understand. But at that moment, she felt that there was something different about the youth in front of her. But what exactly was the difference? She couldn't say it. After the lunch break, Fujio didn't return to the classroom. No one knew where she had gone. At the end of the long corridor were individual offices for each teacher. The young man walked forward slowly with his hands in his pockets. He didn't seem to be worried about being captured by the surveillance cameras. The office door was not closed. He could faintly hear the sounds coming from inside. Chapter 526. "Teacher, I'm not willing, please don't make me call my parents, I'm really working hard in my studies." "Silly child, this isn't about your studies, you know what I mean." Fujio stopped, and there was only darkness left in her eyes. She couldn't appear directly, the skateboard beneath her feet moved. A loud bang came from the door. "Oh, who's there?" A middle-aged man walked out, looking left and right as though he was afraid of being discovered. Of course, Fujio wouldn't let him see her figure. Her tall and straight back was against the wall, and her eyes were indifferent. When the girl saw the skateboard, she lifted her head abruptly, turning towards the end of the corridor. "Was it Fujio?" The middle-aged teacher narrowed his eyes. "Looks like it's not a good time to talk anymore. Go back to class first. As for other things, I advise you not to speak carelessly in front of everyone. Otherwise, you know very well what the consequences will be. You're a student, you should study hard and speak less." Most importantly, you shouldn't slander others. The teacher needs to prepare for class. You should go. Yes. The girl held onto her report card, her fingers trembling as she walked. When she caught sight of the person behind the wall, her eyes widened. Why aren't you walking? The teacher asked from behind. The girl watched as the clean young man pressed his thin lips against his lips and made a shushing gesture at her. The teacher arched a brow. Li Mengran? It's nothing, teacher. I just wanted to say that I've remembered everything you said. Li Mengran turned back, forcing a smile. Only then did the teacher stop walking forward. I knew you were a smart kid. Smart? Cowardly. Li Mengran clenched her fists. She pretended as though nothing had happened and continued walking. The teacher turned back, closing the office door. At this moment, Fujio walked out, lowering her lids to look at the reddened girl. She passed her a lollipop, smiling faintly. Are you in a bad mood? Sorry, I lost control of the skateboard and knocked into something I shouldn't have. Li Mengran knew the youngster was helping her out. There wasn't a single person in number 1 middle school who didn't know him. The prince who skateboarded through the school grounds. He was free and easy, handsome and gentle, just like the light. No matter how dumb Li Mengran was, she knew that there was no such thing as a skateboard going out of control. It was because the young man heard something that he helped her out of the predicament. It was just that kind of thing was too embarrassing to talk about. Li Mengran clenched her fists. After a long while she said, I didn't do it, I didn't want to. I believe you. Almost in the next second. That was all the youth said. Without the slightest hesitation. These were nothing. It was the next sentence. It must be tough for you to fight against all of them alone, right? Li Mengran couldn't describe how she felt when she heard those words. It had been too long. It had been over 20 days. Time seemed to drag on for her. Ms. Yang knew that she was weak and focused on her grades, which was why she had always been like this. Such a thing. She didn't know how to tell others. She was even afraid that if she said it, people would say, look, that person's grades aren't good, but he seduced a teacher. She was too afraid of some gossip. Those groundless remarks. It was almost more hurtful than a real weapon. Therefore she did not dare to say it. Chapter 527. It wasn't that Li Mengran didn't want to tell her mother. But in her mother's eyes, results were the most important. Even though their family was well off, they were still a working family. Her mother's circle seemed to always be comparing children, especially during Chinese New Year. They compared age, maturity, and most importantly, results. She had just entered her second year of high school. She was expected to get into the top schools in the country. Li Mengran felt suffocated. But she could overcome all of this. The most unconquerable thing was when the aunties mentioned results, her mother would look at her with a gaze that seemed as though she was about to give up. After every gathering, her mother's face would darken. Even though she wouldn't flare up at her, she wouldn't say a word to her while driving. Hence, Li Mengran didn't dare to tell her mother about this. Because her mother had always said that Teacher Yang wasn't bad, she even called to say that she wanted to tutor you. This time you had to work hard and get good results during Chinese New Year. Then she would bring you to the beach. Li Mengran knew that the tutor wasn't an ordinary tutor. She was afraid. Hence, whenever the day came, she would switch off her phone and refuse to go to the tutor. She was disobedient, 3 times in a row. One day her mother finally called out to her. What do you want? Is it so hard for you to study? Li Mengran explained. No, I just feel that Teacher Yang, I'm really disappointed in you. Her mother was also an intellectual, hence she never lost her temper. But because of this, Li Mengran couldn't bring herself to speak. She had been suppressing something deep in her heart. She couldn't say it to anyone. She could only stay in her room, hugging her legs and leaning against the wall, wishing to disappear. Because only by disappearing would she not have to face all of this. But the next day the sun would still rise. The tutor became her greatest fear. After listening to Li Mengran's words, her gaze wavered. She couldn't help but reach out to pull the girl into her arms. That embrace was filled with guilt. No one knew who Fujio owed to. Only she knew. If only she had been faster back then. That bouncing girl who loved to lean on her back would never have left. But as a friend, she only cared about her identity as Hacker Z. She did so many things for others, but she couldn't even protect the people around her. This time, it wouldn't happen again. Fujio's eyes darkened. After sending Li Mengran back, he raised his hand and looked at his phone. There was also a message from Almighty Qin. She always believed that the most dangerous place was the safest place. No one would think of hacking into a network in the military compound as long as the Almighty gave her 3 minutes. She could do it without anyone knowing. Is it convenient for me to go over now? Fujio felt that other than making a move, the most important thing was that she wanted to see the Almighty. Because she could only see that man. Only then would she be able to suppress the surging hostility. I can't let myself turn completely black. Now, whenever he closed his eyes, the Christmas card that he had left at home would appear in his mind. The handwriting was clear and lovely, just like the face in his memory. Z, you think I don't know your Z? You did very well. Always like this. Don't look back. Don't worry about anyone. He walked down happily. Also, I am very happy to have you as a friend. Chapter 528. Li Mengran's appearance reminded Fujio of something from a long time ago. All these years she hadn't changed, probably because of the words that person had left for her. When she first came into contact with computers at the age of 6, Fujio's father had taught her countless times, Z, you have to control your abilities, don't let your emotions get the better of you. You have to know that some abilities can become destructive if you can't control them. She thought she was rational enough. But reality proved that she wasn't. After her father passed away, she used Z's nickname to become active on the internet. At that time, many people were infatuated with Z. They felt that this hacker was cool and arrogant, especially when she took down the bad guys. Fujio thought that no one would find out that she was Z. But in reality, even if you could fool everyone, you couldn't fool those who truly cared about you. Some people wouldn't tell you even if they knew all your secrets, they would only smile at you. Even after you returned home, they would squat at your door, rubbing their legs while saying, my mom made your favorite boiled meat. I've been waiting for you for a long time, why are you so late? Look, it's already cold. At that time, Fujio felt that she was the righteous one. Sometimes, because of the case, she even forgot about her friends who needed her the most. When that person wanted to talk to her about something, she hugged her laptop, replying without lifting her head. I'm busy. She wouldn't even appear in school for a few days. Hence, by the time she found out, she had already lost all warmth. Suicide. What kind of pain did she have to go through to commit suicide? She couldn't accept the departure of such an important person. They grew up together, went to school together, discussed the type of guys they liked, and even went to the toilet together after class. What exactly did she want to say to her at that time? Fujio only found out after reading the diary. Some things would always be buried under the glamour. Just like these beasts, they dressed like humans, but they liked to lay their hands on some very young girls. That was the first time Fujio had wanted to kill someone. Second day of school. Before she had even established her outlook on life. She had even thought of countless ways to kill that scumbag. She had even taken action. If it wasn't for the Christmas card on the table, she would have taken action that very afternoon, becoming a murderer through and through. There was such a kind of person in this world. She was beautiful, smart, cute, and delicate. She would suddenly jump on your back when you were in a mess, but when you needed silence, she would accompany you with a smile. Something you don't want her to know. Even if she knew, she wouldn't expose him. She will help you keep all your secrets. Because she doesn't want to hurt you. She wants to protect you. Even though she's weak, she's helping you cover up some things. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lied to the police that you don't know how to use a computer. What about her? What had she done? She was defending what she felt was right when her friends wanted to talk to her. It was the small matter of garlic sprouts on the internet that could not be verified. It probably started from that moment. Fujio began to change. She knew what was important. What should she do with her ability? She had to protect those people. Those who desperately wanted to speak but couldn't. Chapter 529. In the end, Fujio successfully sent that teacher to prison. But what Fujio didn't expect was that in just 3 years, that person appeared in front of her again. Obviously, that teacher had forgotten about her. He changed his name and was still living well. Fujio watched as that person used his family's connections to become a tutor. She questioned herself for the first time. What exactly was black and what was white? Her best friend had experienced the most painful things at the most brilliant age. Why did some women say that it was her own fault? Why didn't the teacher find someone else but a little girl like her? But what about that scum? A famous tutor? That day, Fujio put down her high school textbook. When she got home, she turned on the laptop that she hadn't touched for 3 years. Z returned. She began to realize that some things weren't so healthy. That was because everyone's worldview was different. It had nothing to do with age or identity. Some people felt more at ease when they did something wrong. Anyway, they wouldn't lose anything. Even if they did, it wouldn't be a serious loss. Being despicable was always the path of the despicable. Since no one punished her, then she would punish her. She was destined to be a villain. From that day on, she put on a disguise. During the day, she was like an ordinary person eating instant noodles and playing games. At night, she turned into Z and started to punish a series of evils. Fujio lowered her eyes. She originally wanted to restore her identity after the National League. But this case was different. She had to take care of it. Since Hoshino was here. Then it was time for them to continue their work. Fujio's eyes flashed. It was still the same school where she climbed over the wall. While the security guards were still there, she blocked the cars from entering. Fujio kicked the tree trunk with her long legs and held onto the wall with her left hand. With a push, she flipped over. Her movements were cool and beautiful. So when the uncle who was baking sweet potatoes saw Fujio, he quickly recalled her. "Young man, your skills are at the national level, right?" Fujio wasn't in the mood to joke with the uncle today. She walked to the middle of the road and took a taxi. She sat in the back. The taxi driver saw a high school student with a backpack and raised his eyebrows. "School hasn't ended yet, right?" Fujio took out her homemade notebook and said casually, "Skip class." The chauffeur shook his head. As he drove, he listened to the sound of keyboard typing in the backseat. Could it be that he had misheard? The young man was clearly holding a book in his hand. Everyone was curious, and the driver was no exception. While waiting for the red light, he looked back and found that it was indeed a laptop. He couldn't help but exclaim, "The electronic devices nowadays are really getting more and more advanced. They even have this." Fujio responded with a grunt, and her fingers moved quickly. Strings of codes appeared on the screen. The driver smiled again and said, "You are also playing games, right? My son is the same. He especially likes to play games, but he has been using his cell phone recently. He plays Hero every day. He even says that it's filled with elementary school students. It's a little tricky." Fujio's words and posture convinced the driver that she was playing a game. Therefore, the driver didn't say anything else. Chapter 530. A mailbox that had disappeared for half a year was reactivated. But this mailbox was very special. The two of them wouldn't talk to each other directly. And just like before, Fujio wouldn't leave her specific contact information. The email that Fujio sent out would automatically be destroyed after the recipient finished reading it. On the viaduct that was filled with traffic, an ordinary taxi sped past. The silver-haired youngster in the back seat lowered his eyes. His fingers moved slightly, and there was a clear and loud sound on the keyboard. "Yes, I'm still here." It was just 4 short words. When it suddenly popped up on the screen, there were special effects. And it was the kind of black words that would disappear in the next moment after appearing. All of them indicated that the person who replied to him was Z. Hoshino's gaze paused. He was still sitting on the high-speed train, but there was only the screen in front of him and his amber eyes. Then he smiled slowly. That smile made the girl sitting next to him unable to stop her heart from beating rapidly. He was so handsome that he looked like a star from a TV show. And he was dressed differently from ordinary men. A pure colored sweater matched with the gold-rimmed glasses, making him look as clean as the sun. He knew that person wouldn't leave. Hoshino wouldn't rush Z to tell him where she was. Because he knew that when Z needed him, she would let him appear in the right place. So he wasn't in a hurry. Hoshino looked at the screen again. When he looked up again, he was completely different from before. He was originally going to the south to find someone. He got off at the next station and took the high-speed train back. There were so many people in China, so no one would care if he changed trains midway. The weather outside was getting colder and colder. Taxis couldn't enter the military compound. Fujio got off at the entrance. She carried her school bag on one shoulder and stuffed her left hand into her trouser pocket. She lowered her head and played with her phone. "Brother Mo, I'm here." There was no reply. Fujio didn't care. But when the soldier on duty saw that it was Chin Mo who came to pick her up from afar, he put his right hand on the side of his head and gave a solid military salute. Fujio followed the sound and looked up. She saw that the man didn't even wear a jacket. He was wearing a white shirt and a tie. He was so handsome and abstinent that he didn't fit into the military compound. "Open the door and let him in." Chin Mo's voice was still faint. But after saying this, he added another sentence. "There's no need to stop him if you see him in the future." The two soldiers standing guard looked at each other and saluted again. "Yes, sir." Chin Mo's gaze landed on the youngster in the school uniform. "Why are you still standing there?" Fujio smiled. In order to prevent the Almighty from noticing that she wasn't in a good mood today, she simply smiled. I'll wait for Brother Mo to give me a victory hug to commemorate my second successful wall climbing. Hug. Chin Mo arched a brow. He didn't care if the young man was just joking or not. He strode over. One of them reached out and pulled her into his arms. Fujio paused. Really? Chin Mo pressed down on the youngster's back with one hand, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Why, you dare to flirt but don't dare to take responsibility. Sure enough, meeting the Almighty always had a way to get rid of her unhappy emotions. Fujio's chest couldn't be too close to Chin Mo. However, that familiar aura was like a towering mountain that always made people feel at ease. But the Almighty's words weren't so cute. Chapter 531. Physics book. Brother Mo, can you not say that when we're hugging? Fujio pursed her pale thin lips. I feel dizzy. Chin Mo glanced at the youngster and said slowly, then what do you intend to use to make me tutor you? Hearing that, Fujio suddenly remembered that she originally wanted the Almighty to help her guess the questions, but because of what happened afterward, she didn't go back to the classroom. Instead, she just carried a notebook and went out. Chin Mo arched a brow when the person in front of him didn't speak. Fujio smiled lightly and said frankly, actually the topic wasn't the main point. I just wanted to see Brother Mo. Physics was just an excuse. After hearing this, Chin Mo's fingers paused, the corners of his eyes lifting slightly. The two soldiers at the side tried their best to maintain their dignified image, but they still couldn't help but glance over. After all, his words were quite lethal. Fujio continued to laugh. If you don't believe me, I'll go back and get the book now. No need. Chin Mo glanced at the youngster again and changed the topic. As far as you are concerned, it doesn't matter if you have a physics book or not. It's all astronomy anyway, isn't it? Fujio had to admit that the Almighty wasn't wrong, but if she kept telling the truth, she would lose friends very quickly. Seeing that she wasn't moving, Chin Mo added, since you're here, don't go back. Your physics book doesn't matter. It was obvious that he wanted Fujio to go with him. The clever Fujio smiled lightly. Thank you, Brother Mo. Secretary Liang stood not far away and saw everything. Their CEO had rescheduled an important meeting to tomorrow morning so that he could tutor young Master Gio. If others knew of this news, it would be strange if they didn't have the wrong idea. Most importantly, he didn't even bring his physics textbook. Was this really a make-up lesson, not a date? No, he couldn't think like that. Madame was at home. Furthermore, when did young Master Gio become Madame's son? Madame had been dressing up and had asked more than once when her Gio would arrive. Her house? Her house? Secretary Liang really didn't expect his wife to be a fan of Spade Z. In the afternoon, Madame turned on her phone. She even said that since her Gio wasn't here, she wanted him to play a few rounds with her to practice his skills. He said, sorry Madame, I don't know how to play hero. Madame looked at him in surprise. You don't know how to do it? Then he shook his head. Too stupid. Secretary Liang? This feeling of being mocked by a goddess? Young Master Gio, I just want to ask you, why are you playing hero with your wife? Movie Queen and had a different feeling. Knowing that Fujio was coming, he didn't go out to buy anything. Instead, he sat on the sofa and drank his tea elegantly, but his eyes kept looking outside. Speaking of which, Emir's expression hasn't looked good for the past 2 days. He's going out with that face. Will he scare my Gio away? Movie Queen and turned towards Aunt Zhang. Aunt Zhang had met Fujio before, and she had a good impression of the young man. Young Master Gio isn't someone who only looks at the surface, so he definitely doesn't care about his attitude. You're right. Movie Queen and smiled, her side profile beautiful. In fact, she liked Fujio so much. How could it be simple? It was because the other party had brought him along to play 2 rounds of the game. Chapter 532. They were most worried about Chin Mo's problem. They were afraid that he was hiding everything in his heart, becoming more and more indifferent and unapproachable. If that was the case, no one would understand what he was thinking. That kid had been indifferent to relationships since he was young, and after that incident he was even more distant from everyone. Recently, Movie Queen could clearly feel that her son had changed. Although she still couldn't understand what he was thinking. But at least he looked like a normal person. As Movie Queen was thinking about this, she heard Auntie Zhang say, Madam, young Master Gio came with us. Hearing that, Movie Queen didn't sit down anymore. She stood up and walked towards the entrance. Fujio didn't expect to be treated so warmly by Movie Queen. For example, come on, eat your cake. You must be hungry after finishing your homework. Fujio ate whatever she was given. But homework? What kind of joke was that? She never did homework. So after she swallowed the cake, she asked, "Homework?" "Yes, homework," Movie Queen and said as she pulled out the photos on her phone. "Look at how serious you are in your homework." Fujio was too embarrassed to say that she couldn't bear to listen in physics class, so she was writing some code. But it didn't matter. To her, writing code was work. Fujio took the cake in her hands with a clear conscience. But there was something strange. Why did Movie Queen and have photos of her in class? Seeing the youngster scratching his head, Chin Mo knew that he wasn't doing homework at that time. He undid his tie slowly. "My mom is a fan of yours. She has been praising you since this morning, saying that you study hard and are serious in class. As a wall-jumping scholar, Lord Jio shouldn't disappoint my mom. Finish your homework later." Fujio, the Almighty's trick was really unexpected and shameless. He knew that she didn't like to do homework, but he still tricked her. But fortunately, Movie Queen and was gentle and kind. "The kid is already out of school. Why do you want him to do homework?" "More. I asked Auntie Zhang to make soup for you. What do you like to eat?" "Auntie Zhang will make it for you tonight." Fujio chuckled. "I can eat anything. I'm not picky." Movie Queen and was so nice, totally different from the Almighty. It seemed that even though they were mother and son, there were still changes in their genes. But if it had been in the past, she would have rejected the suggestion of doing homework and followed Movie Queen Anne's instructions. But this time was different. This time she needed some time to do something. So Fujio turned her head and said, "I still have to do my homework and I have to hand it in tomorrow. I'll do it myself first, and if I don't, I'll ask Brother Mo." When Movie Queen Anne heard this, she instantly felt that her Jio was working too hard. She couldn't even eat cake in peace and had to do homework. Chinamo, on the other hand, raised his eyebrows. His hand that was holding the teacup returned to its original position. Then he stood up and said faintly, "Follow me to the study to write." "Good." Fujio picked up her bag and walked forward with Chinamo. When he pushed the door open, he casually asked, "I noticed that you really like studying today." Fujio curled up her lips. "I just want to leave a good impression in front of Movie Queen Anne. After all, she is Brother Mo's friend." "Really?" Chinamo glanced at the youngster again. Chapter 533. Chinamo threw the key on the wooden table and looked back. "Do you believe what you just said? Don't you have homework to do? Come here." Fujio curled her thin lips. She realized that the Almighty still treated her like a little brother. That kiss yesterday was probably nothing. Otherwise, the Almighty wouldn't continue to indulge her like this. "Don't touch anything." Chinamo pointed at the documents on the side, turned sideways and put the ringing phone to his ear. "Hello, the project in Dongqing." Fujio couldn't hear the conversation. But it should be about work. This call was very timely for her. 5 minutes. Establish a virtual IP database. Through the periphery, directly lock onto the target. Such a plan would be faster than using hundreds of computers in the internet cafe. However, there was one thing that needed to be covered by a good firewall. This was also why Fujio chose to act in the military compound. Because there must be some network defense measures here that other places didn't have. In that instant, only the sound of typing could be heard in the silent study. Fujio sat on the wooden chair, her silver hair falling down. Her fingertips danced without any intention of stopping. The more cautious a person was, the more likely they would install some antivirus software on their computer. Although these antivirus software took some time to crack. But it wasn't too much trouble. Fujio looked sideways, sucked on a lollipop and then said softly, 1, 2. When she counted to 3, the screen immediately showed the other party's screen. It wasn't a big deal to use antivirus software to operate remotely. But after finding what she wanted, she had to leave quickly and clear the records. Fujio narrowed her eyes at this time. It was obvious that she was fighting for time. But analyzing the data also required the code to automatically analyze the progress bar. It wasn't safe here. If it wasn't for getting information faster, she wouldn't have chosen to act here. Fujio watched the progress bar on the screen while guarding against the Almighty coming in. At the same time, she had to pay attention to the time. If she didn't leave quickly within the specified time, there would be traces left. Z never left traces when she did things. 95, 96, 97, 100. The progress bar was finally completed. But at this moment, the door of the study was suddenly pushed open. Fujio's back paused, but her fingers didn't stop. She didn't make a sound but pressed the enter key with one hand while looking up with a faint smile. Fortunately it was Movie Queenin. But even if it was Movie Queenin, she couldn't let her know what she was doing. Fujio turned her finger and activated the self-destruct virus. A self-destructing virus was like that. Not only would the computer she had hacked into be infected, but her own computer would also be infected. Even if it was investigated in the future. He wouldn't use her as a source of attack either. However, it was obvious that the self-destruct virus needed time to run. So, after Fujio pressed the Alt key, she stood up naturally. "Auntie?" Movie Queenin chuckled and took a step forward. "Which subject are you working on?" "I'll play hero with Auntie." These two sentences were spoken almost at the same time. Movie Queenin stopped in her tracks. "Sure, but don't play in the study, the atmosphere isn't right. Go to the living room and do your homework later." "Okay." When Fujio finished saying this word. Chapter 534. The self-destruct sequence was activated successfully. At the same time, in the staff office of number 1 middle school, Teacher Yang, who was chatting with someone on his computer, didn't know what was wrong with his laptop. At first, no matter how he typed, it didn't work. A dialog box was built on the interface, and there were things he couldn't understand on it. He couldn't even press the button to restart it. It felt as if his computer was being controlled by someone. Then the screen in front of him turned blue. It didn't work no matter how he slapped the laptop. He couldn't help but curse, "What a crappy computer." And all the information on the other party's computer was copied into the USB drive that Fujio inserted into the laptop. In the Chin family study, Fujio put her hands behind her back, wanting to remove the USB drive. Movie Queenin said again, "In the movies we often act in, the important scenes always happen in the study. Seems like it's not without reason." Fujio's fingers paused. Movie Queenin looked at the youngster's figure and chuckled. "Alright, even if you weren't playing games just now and were typing, I wouldn't tell him. Oh. He's a cold person and he thinks everyone is stupid. The Chin family is all like that, a tyrant in science and technology that no one likes. If you get a question wrong, he'll even raise his eyebrows and say, 'I didn't expect you to get such a simple question wrong.' The Almighty is like that." Fujio quickly removed the USB drive and put it in her palm. She chuckled. "I'll have to trouble Auntie and to keep it a secret for me." Just as she finished her sentence, Auntie Zhang walked in and said to Movie Queenin, "Madam, Miss Wu is here." "Zhen? Why is she here at this hour?" Movie Queenin was still puzzled. Fujio closed the fake notebook with her hands behind her back. This could be considered as doing it without anyone knowing. But Movie Queenin was smart, and she quickly guessed that Fujio was typing. It seemed like she was destined to waste a laptop. But it didn't matter. Her ultimate goal was to get the teacher's information. In the living room, Chinamo had already hung up. He had one hand in his trouser pocket, and he just stood there with an indifferent expression. The person standing opposite him was none other than Wu Zhen. Fujio raised her eyebrows when she saw that face. The other party might not know her, but she still remembered him. This was the one who made her give up the chance to dance at the masquerade ball. But today Wu Zhen wasn't wearing a military uniform, but a police uniform with a badge on her shoulder. Ordinary people wouldn't dress like this during normal times. So, at first glance, Fujio guessed the other party's identity. The police. In her previous life, it was the profession she had dealt with the most. He was also the type of person that she would always try to avoid. Wu Zhen didn't expect anyone else to be in the Chin house. She was about to say something, but after seeing Fujio, she suddenly paused and smiled. "Auntie, and this is?" "Gio Amor's best friend." Movie Queenin lifted the corners of her lips. "Look at your shocked expression. Isn't the Chin family sending anyone over?" Wu Zhen was quick to admit it. "I really didn't expect Brother Amo to bring someone over." "Gio is different," Movie Queenin said happily, her posture elegant. Wu Zhen had never seen her auntie and like anyone so much. Even she hadn't received such an evaluation. Chapter 535. Wu Zhen glanced at Fujio again. Her first impression was that the youngster's skin was too fair, especially his peach blossom eyes. They were so distinct that she seemed to have seen them somewhere before. But Wu Zhen was sure she had never seen this person before. If she had, it was impossible not to have any impression of him. After all, he was indeed too outstanding. Chinamo also noticed Wu Zhen's gaze. He leaned over casually, unknowingly blocking the youngster's face. His voice was indifferent. Are you done with your homework? This question was directed at Fujio. Fujio curved her thin lips. Of course. From a certain perspective, her homework was indeed done. Wu Jin didn't expect that person to actually care about whether someone did their homework or not. In fact, Wu Jin wasn't that old. But she always wanted the best, whether it was her grades or her boyfriend. So after she locked on to her target, she knew her occupation. Plus, she had a family, so entering the police station wasn't that difficult. At that time, Brother Mo had never asked her if she had done her homework. Wu Jin raised her eyebrows, suddenly remembering where she had seen this youngster. The photo on the official Weibo. The photo of the two of them. One of them was him. That photo had been reposted many times, saying that they were an official CP. Wu Jin still remembered that when she first saw the news, she had commented that it was nonsense. She didn't think that anyone was special to Brother Mo. Today, when she saw the youngster, she realized that it was hard to say whether he was special or not. But to be able to enter the Qin family, he must have a good relationship. What kind of CP was that? It was a little ridiculous. Those people were too imaginative. They probably didn't even realize it. Those who were matched like that, whether they were willing or not. But there was another possibility. She suspected that it was the youngster's motive for getting close to Brother Mo. But it was still too early to say that. She wasn't familiar with the esports industry and wasn't one of them. Similarly, Brother Mo shouldn't be one of them. So, she came here to help him get back on track. Brother Mo, the police need you now. Wu Zhen continued with the previous topic, but this time she lowered her voice so that no one else besides Qin Mo could hear. Movie Queen and could tell that they had something to discuss. He brought Fujio to the sofa on the other side. Come Jio, let them talk. Let's play hero. Fujio's mind wasn't on the game. She could tell that the two of them wanted to go to the study. Although the notebook in the study was broken, it was still placed on the wooden table. This policewoman saw it. Fujio's hands paused and she didn't react immediately. Because if she were to react at this time, it would only make her look weirder. When she entered the study room, the Almighty had told her not to touch anything. In that case, the other party probably wouldn't be able to find out about her notebook. Fujio calmed herself down and started moving her fingers. On the surface, she seemed to be playing games with Movie Queen, but in fact, her left ear had never left the source of sound. Wu Jun looked at Qin Mo, unwavering. That handsome face was still as elegant as ever. She wasn't sure if she wanted Brother Mo back to solve the case or if she just wanted to be with him. No matter what the reason was. Chapter 536. 2 days ago, Captain Huang received a very important case. This kind of case is rare in the country. Before every case, the other party would leave a notice for the netizens. Leave a notice in advance? When Qin Mo heard this, he looked up with his deep eyes. However, Wu Jin didn't know that the youngster who was playing games on the other side paused at the same time. Wu Jin only looked at Qin Mo's face. A month ago, this person started his first operation. He revealed a person's crime on the internet. Immediately after, that person fell from the roof in the early morning of the same day. The police judged it as a suicide because there wasn't enough evidence. Not only that, the IP that left the notice was also a fake IP, so no one could find his exact location. But this isn't the main point. The most important thing is this photo. As Wu Jin spoke, she passed the photo to Qin Mo. There's only one sentence written on it. I'm back, signed by Z. At that moment, no one knew. After hearing that sentence, the youngster narrowed his eyes in reaction. Fujio even forgot to swipe the game character on the screen. I'm back. Signed by Z? She knew better than anyone that these words weren't written by Z. Because she was Z. A month ago, she was still busy dealing with the Fu family's matters. How could she be working on a case? But here came the problem. Who was it that was pretending to be her? It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a fake. First of all, the crime was basically the same as hers. Secondly, this message, Fujio raised her eyebrows. Was this person trying to cause trouble? Movie Queen and screamed in a low voice. Jill, why didn't you go back to the tower? You were standing outside and getting beaten until you died. That sentence. Not only did it bring Fujio back to her senses, it also made Qin Mo look over. Immediately after, Qin Mo walked over and lowered his eyes to look at the youngster's phone screen. His voice was very calm and even a little careless. What were you thinking about just now? With this guy's hand speed, how could he die in an ordinary 5v5? He had never died even once in the professional league. Fujio knew that if she didn't find a reason, she would be suspected. She stood up and tilted her head. Her thin lips moved closer to Qin Mo's left ear, speaking mysteriously, "Brother Mo, did your police friend recognize me from last night?" When the youth's pleasant scent wafted over, it came from such a sensitive place. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. He exerted some force with his fingers and straightened the guy's body. He arched a brow. "Are you worried about that?" "Well, everyone has to worry." Fujio smiled faintly. "I didn't expect such a beautiful person to be a police officer." It wasn't clear if it was intentional, but Qin Mo leaned over, his voice deep. "You seem to be against the police." "I do feel conflicted." Fujio would definitely tell the truth about this. After all, the Almighty had already seen through it. If she continued to hide it, it would make her look like she was up to something. Qin Mo glanced at the youngster, straightened his back, and stuffed his hands into his pockets. "Don't worry, she won't know it was you last night." "That's good." Fujio blinked. "Then you guys continue being intimate, I'll focus on playing hero with Auntie." Chapter 537. Continue making out? Qin Mo really wanted to ask this guy, which eye of his saw him making out with someone else. Qin Mo was never one to mistreat himself. Since he was unhappy, he directly pulled the youngster's collar back. "Let's stop the game, let's talk about physics." It had been a long time since Fujio experienced being carried around like a sack. It seemed like the Almighty was angered by her again. Auntie Zhang watched from the side and was anxious. "Young master." Movie queen and was very relaxed. "Auntie Zhang, don't bother about them. Only close friends would do that." Wu Jin also laughed. But in fact she wasn't happy. She originally thought that as long as she told Big Brother Mo about Z, he would focus all his attention on her. How did it turn out like this? Wu Jin lifted her eyes and looked at the two figures who were very close to each other. Since when was there anything more important than solving a case in Big Brother Mo's eyes? But even so, after hearing the name Z, Big Brother Mo's reaction was very obvious, and he didn't reject her suggestion. Now that there were guests at home, it wasn't practical to talk about this in detail. Wu Jin believed that that person would return to the crime squad. It was just a matter of time. On the other side, Qin Mo didn't bring Fujio to the study but to the bedroom. With a click he locked the door. He threw the person onto the bed and put his arm beside the youngster's ear. Even his breath was dangerous, and his fingers pinched Fujio's chin heavily. "This is called making out, do you understand?" Fujio felt that with this position she was on the bottom and the Almighty was on top. When he spoke, even his breath could hit her lips. It was really not suitable for an attack, so she retreated in order to advance. "Understood." But Qin Mo didn't get up immediately. His gaze seemed to move to those lips. Fujio once again realized that the distance between them was too close. Even at this moment she was still a boy. But the Almighty suddenly opened his mouth and interrupted her thoughts. "Not done yet?" Before Fujio could speak, she felt a slight coldness on her lips. When another person's fingertips touched his own lips, the feeling was completely different. Fujio only felt the fingertip move out of her lips, which made her feel a little unnatural. She turned her head away and wiped it with the back of her hand. Qin Mo watched the youngster's movements. He pushed himself up from the bed. "Wait for me here. If you say anything more, I'll bite your mouth open and you won't be able to recover for a month." Qin Mo looked at the youngster. At first, Fujio didn't understand the hidden meaning behind it. She raised her eyebrows, looking very cool and rebellious. Until the Almighty left. Only then did she understand. She opened her mouth and pulled the quilt over. She was inexplicably taken advantage of by the Almighty. But who exactly was impersonating her? Fujio's eyes darkened. Through today's incident, she could finally confirm the Almighty's identity. Psychiatrists and criminologists are secondary. Most importantly, he should have assisted the police more than once. Fujio even had a feeling that the Almighty was very likely to be in the key case investigation unit in China, and that he was the main investigator of a major case. Chapter 538. Before Fujio was reborn in this body, she had heard about the key case investigation unit on Fifth Avenue. It was said that they solved cases very quickly. No matter how old the case was, they would find the culprit within 10 days once they got their hands on it. And some bad guys who wanted to escape from the law would be sent to prison with fatal evidence even if they used their connections. This was the legend of the key case investigation unit. But this was not the whole story. In this legend, The most important point was that there was one person in the key case investigation unit. He didn't hold any position but only assisted. So no one knew what his identity was. However, all the cases were solved in such a short period of time and the real culprit was quickly caught because of this person. Fujio remembered now. Everything seemed to be describing the Almighty. 3 years ago the Almighty was still a high school student. At that time he would have become a legend. Then the current him, just how powerful had he become? Judging from the Almighty's attitude. He seemed to have a stubborn attitude towards cases related to her. Fujio wasn't sure if Chin Mo would accept the female police officer's proposal to work with them. But she had seen the Almighty's ability to catch people. It was really tricky. Even she wasn't sure if she could cover up the Almighty's meticulous logical analysis with a disguise. Fujio raised her eyes and looked at the dark sky outside. There were some people you really didn't want to be enemies with. But Fujio understood. Her actions were undoubtedly challenging the authority of some people. That was why they wanted to catch her. But the Almighty wasn't like that. The Almighty only wanted the truth. Fujio was clear that if she continued like this, Chinamo would find out sooner or later. But she couldn't wait for this case. She had to admit that she didn't know the purpose of the imposter. But this kind of behavior was starting to make her movements unsafe. After Fujio heard the news, only 2 words appeared in her mind: they're not friendly. But she didn't have time to care about that now. The most important thing right now was the information in the USB. If she wanted that scumbag to get the punishment he deserved, she had to find something from the information. And this operation couldn't be like last time, where she needed to cover up. Otherwise she would be targeted by the Almighty. Fujio laid on the bed for 5 minutes. She closed her eyes quietly and opened them again. She thought about the process but Chinamo didn't come up. She decided not to lie down anymore. She pushed the door open and went downstairs. That female officer didn't leave. Instead she sat on the sofa and asked Movie Queen in about her. So that Fujio is the young master of the Fu family. I really couldn't tell but he's quite polite unlike the rumors. But he seemed to be on good terms with Brother Imo. How did they know each other? Movie Queen and placed her phone down and chuckled. Jin, when did you become interested in such things? Wu Jin paused and smiled. It's rare to see someone so close to Brother Imo. I'm really happy for Brother Imo, so I want to know what kind of person Fujio is. Chapter 539. Wu Jin didn't know what to say. She thought that Auntie Anne would know something, but she didn't expect it to be like this. She knew that it wasn't appropriate for her to continue asking. After all, Auntie Anne wouldn't like her to know so much about someone she had never met. So Wu Jin didn't ask anymore and smiled. Auntie Anne is right. It's important to be nice when interacting with people. After Fujio heard this, she raised her eyebrows. It seemed that this policewoman wasn't stupid. But even so, her intention of asking about her was obvious. Logically speaking, since she didn't recognize her from the ball last night, she shouldn't be so interested in her affairs, unless there was something else. Fujio didn't like anyone to ask about her no matter what. She had to be on guard against this policewoman because the more mysterious she was, the more unstable she would be, not to mention that she was a policewoman. Fujio didn't walk up at this thought. Instead, she stood at the top of the stairs and began to look for the Almighty. Auntie Zhang saw Fujio coming down with a plate of fruits in her hands. She said happily, "Young Master Jio is here too. Come have some fruits. These are Madame's favorites." "Thank you, Auntie Zhang." Fujio put a slice of orange in her mouth. She looked at the people who were still chatting and asked softly, "Auntie Zhang, where's Brother Imo?" "Young Master." Auntie Zhang looked back and forth. "Young Master asked Madame for something just now. Now, he's probably in the study getting his books." "Study?" Fujio's fingers paused and she immediately walked in the direction of the study. Her steps weren't hurried but they were very fast. If the Almighty saw that she had brought a notebook, he would definitely suspect something. Fujio hoped that she could make it in time. She pushed open the study's wooden door and saw Chinamo sitting at the table. His face was as handsome as ever but there was something in his hand. It was none other than her disguised notebook. The sound of the door opening made Chinamo lift his lids. He glanced over faintly. Fujio didn't know what he knew from that glance. But she never left any traces behind. Even though she was interrupted by Movie Queen in, she still activated the computer's self-destruct program. This meant that the Almighty couldn't come to the computer and discover the secrets inside. But even so, it would be great if the Almighty didn't notice that she was using the laptop. But it was obvious that not only did the Almighty notice it, but he also used his fingers to pick up one end of the notebook. His voice was indifferent. "What do you usually bring this to class for?" Fujio chuckled. "I play games, do some research, and sometimes browse the hacker forum." Everything Fujio said was true, but there was one thing she didn't mention. That was why she brought her laptop to class. She needed to attack the network at any time. Chinamo retracted his hand and looked at the youngster standing at the door. His gaze was deep. "I haven't asked you, but when did you realize you had the ability to be a hacker?" Chapter 540. Even though the Almighty didn't know much about the owner of this body, he still had some contact with her. He probably felt that something was different, so he probed her with everything he asked in the beginning, and he was very strict with her. Fujio understood all of this. So it was unrealistic to say that she had the hacking ability recently. But if she said that she had it before, then she needed to tell a story. Fujio put her hands in her pockets and walked closer. "It was probably when I was in junior high when my mom was just kicked out of the company. That triple success made my dad never come home again. Everyone knew that my mom's real power had been taken away, and I wasn't sure if I would still be the young master of the Fu family. At that time, I saw a post on an internet cafe forum about teaching others how to crack virus software. It wasn't very complicated, but even I didn't expect it to be so easy. I just tried to crack all the antivirus software in the internet cafe at that time. Later on, I became interested in this field, and after I learned about the use of the internet, I wanted to use it to deal with that family and help my mom get the company back. I was young at that time, so I wasn't allowed to enter big internet cafes, except for some small ones. Later on, I learned that I would be arrested by the police for doing these things, so I went to nightclubs more often and appeared in front of everyone with a different image. It was actually a kind of protection for myself, and that's why I was so against that female police officer just now." There was indeed no mistake in the timing. Chinamo had asked someone to look up some information on the young man. Because at that time he had doubted the young man's hacking skills. In junior high school, however, a change had occurred in the young man. It seemed that from that time on, this person became more and more infatuated and decadent. Fujio paused. "Actually, I entered this line of work because I really admired someone at that time. That person was the hacker who published the post about cracking virus software. Her code name was Z." Chinamo interrupted Fujio, stood up from the chair, and looked at the young man with a meaningful look in his eyes. Fujio raised her eyebrows. "Brother Imo, how did you know?" "The game name is Spade Z, so it's not hard to guess." Chinamo didn't tell the young man that it was all because of the other party's skills. Fujio smiled faintly. "Just think of it as my Chinibyu. But that person didn't post any technical posts and I only learned a little bit. I heard many people in the industry say that this person is different from others. She doesn't like to show up unless there's a case. She seems to have helped the police solve a lot of cases, but the police are still trying to catch her. It's quite strange. Brother Imo, why do you think the police are always after her?" Chinamo looked at the youngster, his eyes dark. When he spoke in a low voice, it sounded like he was reciting a poem. Because those who fight with the evil dragon will eventually become the evil dragon themselves. When you stare into the abyss stares back at you. Chapter 541. I'm not a philosopher and I'm not Z, so I don't know what she will do when the time comes. Chinamo glanced at the youngster. Alright, it's not suitable for people in their rebellious phase to talk about this. Come here. Fujio once again felt that her identity as a high school student was despised by the Almighty. Even the topic depended on age? Also, when would the topic about her rebellious phase end? Fujio didn't move. To be honest, she really wanted to know why the Almighty was so relentless in his pursuit of her. Did he think she was a bad person? Seeing that the youngster didn't come over, Chinamo frowned and lifted the youngster's chin with his fingers. What? Fujio took a step back. Chinamo pulled her back directly. Stay there, don't move. Fujio finally saw what the Almighty was holding in his hand. It was a light-colored lip balm. Wait, Brother Imo, you have something like this? She thought that a straight man like the Almighty wouldn't be like some gay men, who not only kept their skin hydrated, but also their thin lips moist. That was why he had more skincare products than girls, and he was very particular about the brand. I really didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Brother Imo. Chinamo raised his eyebrows and said casually, Stop your messy thoughts. This lip balm belongs to your top fan Mizzen, movie Queen Anne's. Fu Jiu tilted her head and rejected in a manly manner. No need, it's too girly. Qin Mo pinched her chin again. It's colorless. Now you feel girly. Why don't you feel girly when I ask you to work out? I have abdominal muscles too. Fu Jiu pretended to lift her clothes. But this time the Almighty didn't stop her from acting like a hooligan. Instead, he stood there with a faint smile on his face, as if he would allow her to lift him up. Fu Jiu couldn't really lift her clothes, so she gave up. She raised her head and said in a cool voice, "Don't put too much on. If I put too much on, that female officer will recognize me. It will be embarrassing." Kids in their rebellious phase usually care a lot about their faces. Qin Mo lowered his eyes slightly, and his fingers touched the beautifully shaped thin lips in front of him. Fu Jiu once again felt the slight coldness. When the fingertips brushed across her lips, it brought about an itch. It wasn't obvious, but it felt like a feather hitting her. As soon as she opened her eyes, she could see the Almighty's pleasing face, tall nose bridge, deep eyes, and handsome features. She had to admit that he was very charming. "Brother Mo, are you of foreign descent?" "Amich," Qin Mo replied faintly. "My grandfather is an overseas Chinese studying in England." "No wonder. Mixed bloods were usually handsome." Qin Mo lowered his waist further. "Raise your chin higher and open your mouth." They were very close to each other. It was because it was too close. That was why he felt that this posture was a little too ambiguous. In addition, when the familiar scent of tobacco hit his lips, Fu Jiu finally couldn't help but say, "Brother Mo, I can actually apply lip balm on my own. The color will be lighter." Qin Mo didn't care about the youngster's opinion at all. He started to brush from the center of his lips. "Don't worry about the color and don't think about the police. With me around, no one will be able to catch you." Fu Jiu wanted to say that this wasn't the problem, but didn't the Almighty feel that they were too close? Chapter 542. She thought of the word kiss. Fu Jiu wanted to move away subconsciously. She didn't know if the Almighty had seen through her. At this moment, Qin Mo said calmly, "I investigated Z." Fu Jiu tried her best to look surprised. "You've investigated Z?" Qin Mo knocked the youngster's head. "Listen to me, don't move, it's not good." "Fu Jiu. Are all younger brothers so pitiful nowadays? Her real body is in America." Qin Mo didn't tell her what happened that time. Instead, he rubbed the youngster's lips and his eyes were heavy. "If you want to know why I wanted to investigate her, it's probably because I finally found such an opponent, so I wanted to take a look." "Fu Jiu. You really can't look at the Almighty like a normal person. Her operation is not bad and her way of doing things is very interesting. But at that time, it seemed to be out of control." Qin Mo's tone was calm. Because of this, she needed someone to tell her not to go astray. Fu Jiu didn't expect to hear such an answer. Don't go astray? It would be a pity for such an opponent to turn into an evil dragon. It was just a careless ending. It made Fu Jiu stop in her tracks. So, the Almighty appeared in the Fifth Avenue to save her? In this world, there was probably no one who knew your situation better than your opponent. So, it was an opponent? Fu Jiu couldn't help but chuckle. From a long, long time ago. She used to say that the Almighty was the most righteous person she had ever met. His values were even more perfect than his looks. He was righteous and no evil could invade him. He was a police officer, but his way of thinking was different from the police. He was never a stickler for rules, but he was born to be responsible. Many foreigners like to use the Great Wall to describe the greatness of China. But Fu Jiu felt that it wasn't the Great Wall that truly defended against foreign invasions. It was the soldiers stationed at the border. It was the Almighty. All she could see was this kind of beauty. That kind of majestic tenacity was enviable. "If you keep looking at me like that, I will think that you want me to kiss you." Qin Mo grabbed the youngster's collar and suddenly lowered his whole body. His thin lips were just a few centimeters away from Fu Jiu's, and his eyes were dark and deep. It was only then that Fu Jiu recalled their unpleasant kiss. She took a very serious stance and said, "I was just distracted by Brother Mo's handsomeness. I definitely had no intention of taking advantage of you." Qin Mo looked at the almost transparent face in front of him, his breath slipping past the youngster's ear. "Is that so? Brother Mo, you have to believe me." Fu Jiu felt that the Almighty was much more dangerous than before. Her ears were itchy and she couldn't help but rub them. "I would have told you in advance even if I wanted to take advantage of you." Qin Mo retracted his hand when he saw the youngster's expression. He knew that when dealing with someone, some things couldn't be too obvious. Moreover, ever since he came back that day, he had read books on this subject. If you want to turn a person gay, you have to do it slowly. The young man probably had no intention of taking advantage of him. However, he was constantly thinking about making this person his. When he rubbed those pale lips just now, he even wanted to kiss them without caring about anything else. Chapter 543. No matter how smart Fujio was, she couldn't guess what Chinemo was thinking. What's more, that man exuded an aura of abstinence and nobility. To others, it didn't look like Chinemo was going to kiss Fujio, but Fujio was flirting with Almighty Chin. In terms of looks, Fujio looked like a demon. However, she wasn't sure if the Almighty believed what she said, so she had to be more careful in the future. However, Chinemo didn't tell the youngster. He was sure that the laptop had been used. The laptop's base was warm, which meant that it had been used not long ago. It was obvious who had used it. But now the laptop couldn't be turned on. What kind of situation did a hacker encounter to make his laptop unable to be turned on? Chinemo looked up and glanced at the youngster's tall and straight back view. This guy, what was he trying to hide? He definitely wouldn't stay in the study for long. Not to mention Movie Queen, and Wu Zhen was also there. She was still chatting with Movie Queen and was hospitable and invited her for dinner. Wu Zhen didn't reject. In fact, she came at this time because she wanted to spend more time with that person. But this time, she didn't expect that there would be a youngster at the table. The atmosphere was completely different from before. Chinemo sat on Fujio's right. He was wearing a pure white sweater and his black hair hung down. He was full of abstinence, but there was an undetectable gentleness in his eyes. This was something Wu Zhen had never seen before. Movie Queen sat opposite Fujio. Ever since the dishes were served, her chopsticks hadn't stopped moving. "Gio, try this Beijing pork bun. It's delicious." Okay. Fujio was indeed the type to eat whatever she was given. Her handsome face was stuffed round, and when she raised her head, she looked like a squirrel. It was rare to see such a handsome squirrel. Chinmo's lips curled up. He thought that feeding the youngster was a good entertainment. Fujio always felt that the food on her plate couldn't be finished. Forget about Movie Queen. Why did the Almighty join in the fun? Once the food on her plate was finished, he would immediately fill it up for her. Was he treating her like a pig? Wu Zhen's hand that was holding the bamboo chopsticks froze. Then she laughed. "The National League is in a few days, right? Seeing you like this, those fans will definitely have a nosebleed again. To them, your existence is a blessing." Movie Queen was delighted. They are indeed a good match, they are both so handsome. After the National League, I will definitely poach Gio over to be my partner for a month. Then I will tell everyone that he is my godson. Fujio. She had never known that Movie Queen enjoyed showing off her godson. "Andy, you might as well poach the Almighty. Girls like him are more likely to like him." Movie Queen lowered her voice. "I tried before, but it didn't work, Mom." Chinemo interrupted Movie Queen. "The next time you poach someone, don't do it in front of me, the captain. Otherwise, I can only forbid my teammates from interacting with you, including playing games with you online." Movie Queen glanced at her son, preparing to call her husband to complain. Chapter 544. That's right, when Chinemo agreed to let Fujio come to the Chin family, his intentions weren't simple. It wasn't that he didn't want to let go. Because even he himself couldn't believe that he would have those uncontrollable thoughts about a boy who was worse than him. If the youngster knew about his thoughts, what would the result be? At that moment, Chinemo felt like his heart had stopped beating. But Chinemo knew very well that from their interactions these days, he wasn't gay. Because he was a hacker, it was possible for him to hide his identity as a gay. Plus, the youngster's care and gentleness towards the girl made Chinemo realize that if he didn't hold on to this person now, he would never be able to. No matter what, he didn't want to see that scene ever again. Especially after the masquerade party. This thought grew even stronger. Because he couldn't bear anyone else kissing the youngster. It didn't matter if the other party was a man or a woman. Since he couldn't bear to lose him, he would make him his. Chinemo knew very well that it wasn't easy to turn a straight man gay. Because if any other man other than the youngster got close to him, he would feel disgusted. Not to mention doing intimate things in the future. It was probably related to Chinmo's background. He was born with a predatory nature. So even if there was a chance, he wanted to turn this person gay. Fujio's mind wasn't on physics. It was on the USB in her pocket. There wasn't much time left, but she couldn't go back immediately. If she left just like that, then what she did in the study would be too obvious. She had to wait until this was over. Fujio's thoughts were indeed more focused than before. Because the best police force in the country was in Jiang City. If the Almighty was the legend of the crime squad, that meant that the crime squad was also in Jiang City. And according to her understanding of the police, when they weren't sure of the target, they would usually search the sea and find a hacker with similar techniques. To avoid being discovered, she had to hide well before taking action. As for how she would do it, it depended on whether the Almighty would return to the crime squad. No matter how much you stare, you can't write the answer to this question if you don't move your pen. A familiar male voice came into her ears. Fujio looked over and said simply, "It's too difficult. I'll explain it again." Chinamo was originally standing, but at this moment his arm went around Fujio's back, and his fingertips touched the exercise book. It was as if he was hugging the young man from behind, and the scene was incomparably beautiful. Using Formula 2 here, the night outside the window darkened little by little, and it was impossible to see people's shadows clearly because fog lingered everywhere. Wu Zhen held a cup of tea in the living room until the tea in her palms turned cold. She clenched her fists and stood up, smiling faintly at Movie Queen and, "Since Brother Mo is so busy, I won't be staying any longer. Auntie, and you should rest early too. I still have to work when I get back. There have been too many cases recently, so please tell Brother Mo to consider my words. Auntie, I believe you wish for Brother Mo to return to the crime squad. After all, this is the only way to resolve the knot in his heart." Movie Queen and didn't speak at first, but in the end she said faintly, "Let's see what he thinks. As long as he continues being like this, it doesn't matter if he doesn't feel happy, it all depends on whether he's willing or not." "I understand." Wu Zhen put on her police cap, but the smile on her face didn't disappear. Even if Brother Mo didn't return, the next time Z made a move. Chapter 545. Why can't you just apply one formula to another? Why do you have to apply this to this and that to that? Fujio liked to hold her pen in her mouth ever since she started studying physics. She was very talkative, completely different from her usual demure self. Chinamo lowered his lids to look at the youngster's fluffy head. For some reason he found the youngster, who was usually infuriating, rather cute. He resisted the urge to pull him into his arms and caress him. The corners of his mouth curved up without a trace. The two of them were very close to each other. Fujio looked up and saw the Almighty's smile. She couldn't help but be stunned by his beauty, and then she shook her head. Chinamo saw the young man's expression and raised his eyebrows. "Why are you shaking your head? Brother Mo, you're always so handsome. Don't you feel any pressure?" Fujio didn't want to read those physics books that didn't suit her, so she found a topic to talk about. Chinamo glanced at the young man. "You're so good at physics, but you still feel no pressure." "Fujio." There was no way to continue the conversation. "Want to rest?" Chinamo stood up straight, looking indifferent in his handsome face. Fujio casually put her hands on the back of the chair. That posture was very handsome, and she admitted readily, "It's a bit late today, why don't we continue tomorrow?" Fujio said this not because she was too tired, but because she needed to find a place to check out the information she had copied. Chinmo's slender fingers tapped on his wrist to let the young man look at the time. It wasn't even 8 o'clock, so it wasn't late at all. Chinamo turned his eyes and looked very noble. "Going back so early, do you want to do something else?" "Shower and sleep," Fujio answered seriously. Chinmo's voice was very calm. "I'll say it again, do you believe it yourself? The wall-climbing night owl is a top student." Fujio. What the hell was with the night owl this time? Student Fujio didn't want to move at all. The Almighty's critical strike was too strong. "Get up." Chinamo closed his physics book. Fujio raised her eyebrows. "What are you doing? Eating again?" "I can't eat anymore." "Seems like your mind is only filled with eating and sleeping." The Almighty's tone was a little mocking. Fujio's thin lips twitched. She had been stuffed with all kinds of food since the beginning, so it was normal for her to think in that direction. "If you're too tired from studying, you can take a break." With that, he brought Fujio to another room. "Let's watch a movie." Hearing that, Fujio looked around at the equipment around her. The projector and the big screen were all installed at home. That was why capitalists were so evil. Even watching a movie was so different. Chinamo was already sitting in the middle, his long legs slightly crossed. Since it was night time, his eyes looked even deeper and more mesmerizing. There are films over there, you can choose any one. Fujio didn't understand. How did they end up coming to watch a movie? But according to the Almighty's personality, he should like some psychological or detective movies. It was a good opportunity to watch and learn. She picked a random film and pushed it in. Then, she sat next to the Almighty and supported her chin with one hand, preparing to watch it seriously. In the beginning, Fujio didn't think much of it. After all, the plot was arranged well. When the people above had all come out. The more Fujio watched, the more she felt that this film had nothing to do with being a detective. Chapter 546. Fujio glanced at the screen and turned to look at the Almighty. The man's perfect side profile was hidden in the darkness. His dark eyes were very calm, as if the scene in front of him couldn't be any more normal. Was she thinking too much? Fujio tapped the side of her face with her fingers. She had just taken a sip of the tea when she was shocked by the next scene. Cough cough. She couldn't be blamed for choking. They were enemies 1 second ago and the next second they were kissing. No one would have a strong ability to accept such things. Most importantly, it was those two blue kids. Two blue kids, American drama. Luckily it was Fujio. If it were someone else, they would have stood up from the stimulation. Fujio glanced sideways at the Almighty who was sitting beside her. The Almighty's eyebrows were good-looking to begin with. When he frowned, the strong sense of abstinence intensified. Fujio hadn't opened her mouth yet. Chin Mo's voice came over casually. Are you trying to explain to me that you didn't choose this film on purpose? Fujio thought that of course she didn't do it on purpose, but why did the Almighty ask her in advance? It seemed like she did it on purpose. Over 100 films. Chin Mo didn't look at the youngster. Instead, he adjusted his sleeves and said slowly, "You're really good at choosing, Fujio." This feeling of not being able to explain herself was a little depressing. No, Brother Imo, you're a straight man. Why do you have this kind of film? Was there any justice in this world? Chin Mo lowered his eyes and took a sip of tea. He didn't seem surprised. Because the Chin group made this director. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even know what this film is. Which meant that he was supporting his own business. Fujio became even more depressed. She really wasn't suited for this kind of game of choosing these days. She really picked whatever she wanted. I'll press the pause button. Fujio always felt that after the kiss, there would be more intense scenes. She had to stop as soon as possible in case the Almighty would say that she still wanted to sleep with him and chose this film on purpose for him to watch. That was why a dark history couldn't be washed clean. Why do you press the pause button? That pleasant, deep voice came from behind her. Guilty? To prove that she wasn't guilty, Fujio sat back down and said evilly, "No, keep watching." It turned out that stubbornness was always harming her. After the first kiss. After that, it was natural to kiss again. Fortunately, there weren't any extreme scenes. But even so, every time he saw them kissing on the screen, she couldn't help but take another sip of tea. Fujio. If Fujio were to look at Chin Mo at this moment, she would definitely see the smile on the Almighty's face. There were more than 100 films and every one of them had a boy as the main character. The first thing Fu was at. A Jiu Fu Zhang of Zhang. Song was be at he or at. Of course, choosing a movie was also very particular. One could not place too much emphasis on taste. Otherwise, not only would the other party not be able to accept it, but it would also cause the other party to hate it. Chin B. Fu wasn't. In reality, just as Jiang Zhua had said, Chin Mo couldn't be gay and he would never be gay. Chapter 547. The movie went on for a long time. Fujio didn't know how the Almighty felt. Anyway, she was watching it very seriously. When the movie finally finished, the last scene was still fixed on the male lead's face. She could vaguely see the tear stains on it. This made Chin Mo frown. If possible, he wanted the youngster to see a good ending, not such a heavy movie. But Fujio thought it was good. It's hard for two people with different identities to be together. A policeman and a bandit, even if the bandit treated the policeman extremely well and even broke many principles for the other. But black was always black. If there was only one person left alive, I hope that person is you. This was the end of the movie. Fujio looked at the man who was quietly being shot. She looked at him holding a cross in his hand even at the end. She looked at him smiling slowly. His pale side profile was blurred by the light, but it was still handsome. Then the policeman was reminiscing. He had known that person since he was young. They got into trouble together, fought together and smoked together. But they separated later on. Only then did he have a different life experience. But all these couldn't compete with the kiss that person fell on him while he was asleep. After all, it was still a romance movie. In real life, the bandit and the policeman didn't have much of a relationship. Fujio held her chin and looked languid. Brother Imo, I'm in a bad mood after watching the tragedy. I want to go home to wash up and sleep. You seem to want to go back as soon as possible today. Chin Imo threw a sentence over indifferently. At that moment, Fujio felt like she was playing hero and was stunned by a big move. Did the Almighty suspect her by saying this? At the moment she couldn't be sure. She only smiled more mischievously. No, I just don't want to face the evil physics anymore. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Play some games and see your recent condition. Also, you probably haven't seen the Xiangnan team's video. Fujio really hadn't seen it. For the competition and to avoid suspicion, she followed Chin Imo to the game room. The electronic equipment in the Almighty's room was more complete than her temporary office. There were 3 computers and 1 laptop with a big screen hanging on it. When 2 people played games, the effect was needless to say perfect. Especially when it comes to Ben. Chin Imo could attack the monster while looking at the youngster. It was indeed getting late. However, he did not want this person to leave. That was why he would find such an excuse to keep them here again and again. However, this was not the most ideal situation. Ideally, he would be able to see this person the moment he opened his eyes, and this person would only belong to him. This was indeed not the feeling she had for her younger brother. Chin Imo tilted his head, his gaze sliding past the youngster's face, landing on the thin lips that hadn't fully recovered from the bite. His eyes darkened. However, he still had to let this fellow go back. Otherwise, he wasn't sure what he would do. After playing, Fujio was still watching Xiangnan's video. The more she watched, the more serious her expression became. She realized that there was a reason why everyone was paying so much attention to Xiangnan. Regardless of whether it was in terms of formation or mechanics, the other side could almost be called the style of a king. Not only was their damage top-notch, but they were also very good at positioning and ambushing. Chapter 548. This person's finger technique should be very beautiful. Fujio tapped the screen with her finger. Chin Imo took a look, replying slowly, "Is that so?" Fujio was smart. She immediately laughed and said, "Of course not as good as Brother Imo. This must be the natural enemy of Brother Imo that the media is talking about." Just a game. What natural enemy? Chin Imo lit a cigarette, his eyes dark. But in order to get the national champion we have to defeat Xiangnan. Hence, you should retract your thoughts and spend some time on training. If nothing goes wrong, our final opponent will be Xiangnan. Fujio nodded and remembered that person's in-game name. The word Xiao was very eye-catching. It was indeed eye-catching. She remembered that on the official Weibo, this person always reposted the Almighty stuff. Could it be that these 2 people knew each other? At this thought, Fujio reached out her hand and put it on Chin Mo's shoulder. "Brother Imo, I have a feeling that their captain is up to no good. Otherwise, he wouldn't keep reposting your official Weibo account. Why don't you just use your charm to stun him and I'll follow up from behind? Don't think everyone is gay just because you're gay." Chin Imo reached out his hand with a faint smile and patted the youngster's face. He enunciated each word clearly, "If you try to push me away again, I'll use my charm on you." Fujio, the Almighty was getting more and more dangerous. He didn't know if it was because of that kiss. He was always using this to threaten her. "I might not be there for the first 2 matches of the national competition." Chin Mo's voice was calm. "If I'm not on the field, you will be the captain and command the team, understand?" Fujio didn't expect the Almighty to suddenly say this. She frowned. "Why isn't he here?" "I have some personal matters to attend to." After Chin Imo finished speaking, he straightened up and avoided the youngster's lips. "It's getting late, I'll send you back." "All right." Fujio didn't ask anything. In fact, as soon as the Almighty said he was busy with his personal matters, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. Fujio could basically guess what the Almighty was busy with. The case. There's a case about the Major Crimes Unit. Fujio's eyes darkened. Even when Chin Imo called her again, she didn't make a sound. Chin Imo assumed the youngster was worried about the National League. He walked over and pressed his fingers on the youngster's head. "Don't worry, nothing personal is more important than our competition. I didn't show up for the first 2 matches because I'm sure you can win without me. Everyone in the team needs the ability to fight alone. It's the same even without me, understand?" Understood. Fujio smiled. This was the Almighty always knowing what his goal was. However, even so, she had no choice but to be prepared. Because one day she would have to face the Almighty. Whenever he thought of this, he would inevitably get distracted. He wasn't worried about being caught. He probably didn't want to see that person look at him with disappointment. So I have to be a good opponent for the Almighty, right? Since they were destined to be opponents, then they should fight openly. The Almighty probably liked this type of opponent. In fact, it was the same for Fujio. She had said before that if she hadn't been discovered too quickly, she would have died. She really wanted to know who was better, her or the Almighty. Now, did this mean that her words had come true? Fujio stuffed her hands in her pockets and looked at the tall and straight figure walking in front of her. No matter what, she was very lucky to have an opponent like the Almighty. He was strong but never bullied the weak. He was born rich but full of righteousness. Chapter 549. Even if he knew that continuing to take action meant that there was no turning back. After returning to the Fu family, the first thing Fujio did was to enter her temporary secret base. To prevent himself from being recognized, Fujio disguised herself this time. Rather than calling it a disguise, it was more accurate to say that she had reverted to her original appearance. Soon, a tall and slender figure appeared in front of the mirror. She was wearing a pure black windbreaker, white jeans and knee-high military boots. It was as if she was exuding handsomeness from her very bones. She wore a black earring on her left ear. She had a beautiful face, thin lips and waist-length chestnut-colored hair. She even wore contact lenses on her eyes. 10 past 10. At this hour, there were still a lot of people in the internet cafe. However, the location of the internet cafe was very important. He couldn't do it near his house, nor could he go to Uncle Yin's place. Uncertainty was the most troublesome part for the police when it came to locating her. Therefore, Fujio had always been very casual in her choice of location. It was the same this time. He opened his card bag with a swoosh. He was different from some rich people. Fujio's card bag contained all sorts of IDs and work permits. Every time he used his ID card, it would become invalid. This was to not leave any traces. Fujio's operation this time was the same. Boss, turn on a computer. Usually, at this time the people who came would be playing all night. There weren't many people in the internet cafe. After all, it wasn't a Saturday or Sunday, and the students weren't on holiday yet. Some of them had skipped classes to form a team to play hero. Even the person sitting at the cashier counter didn't raise his head. Working overnight? If it's overnight, I'll drive right now. No, just an hour. Fujio said as she handed over the money. That person operated the mouse with one hand and passed the change to Fujio with the other. In other words, he didn't notice Fujio's appearance at this stage. The only thing that could capture images was the internet cafe's surveillance camera. But from such an angle he could only capture Fujio's back. The first thing he did after turning on the computer. Fujio hacked the internet cafe's surveillance system and then checked the contents of the USB. It was very clean inside and there was not even a bit of residue. But the more it was like this, the more troublesome it was. This proved that Teacher Yang was very vigilant. Even on the computer there was nothing that could harm him. However, this was the school office computer, not the one at home. It seemed that if they wanted to find any evidence, they had to first confirm the teacher's home address. Fujio narrowed her eyes, and her fingers moved quickly on the keyboard. It wasn't difficult to hack into number 1 middle school's school network. All she had to do was find the other party's address, and she could continue to hack through the network cable. However, something even more troublesome happened. In the teacher section of the school website, the teacher with the surname Yang did not fill in his specific home address. Fujio paused and quickly retreated. He glanced at the contents of the USB drive again. There was really nothing in it. But there was a QQ chat history that caught Fujio's attention. It was a conversation between Teacher Yang and an unknown person. First, the man asked, "How is it? Still not done?" The buyer has been waiting anxiously. Yang Ming, in a few days. Don't worry, sooner or later you will be able to taste something fresh. Fujio looked at this sentence over and over again, feeling that there was something wrong. No teacher in any school would sell food as a part-time job. Chapter 550. It wasn't food that he was selling. If it wasn't food, it could only be a human. Fujio clenched her fists, her gaze sinking. It was as dark as the night, turbulent and difficult to calm down. Things were more complicated than she had imagined. Moreover, she couldn't alert the enemy. What was the use of catching a worm? If she didn't uncover the identity of the buyer, this matter would never end. Fujio used the QQ search function to search for the other party's QQ account. The information was sparse, only age and occupation. Fujio narrowed her eyes when she saw the occupation column. She sat there for a long time without moving. She had the urge to smoke. She didn't hide it, ordering a box of Marlboro from the bar counter before she left. Fujio didn't smoke like Chinamo, she had an indescribable aloofness. Especially when she stood in an empty alley, her aloofness would be especially obvious. So that's the case. Fujio spoke with a puff of smoke. No wonder he was so arrogant, seems like I have to take it slow. There was a high possibility that the case would be reversed due to the identity of the buyer. Hence, before there was any concrete evidence, the only thing she could do was to protect Li Mengran. How could she make everything seem natural? Fujio quickly thought of an idea. However, before she could implement this method, a voice suddenly rang out. That Yang had taken the initiative to look for her. Student Fujio, come with me. At the entrance of Class D, his gaze swept across the room with a stern expression. If one didn't know his inner self, they probably wouldn't think of him as a pervert. But in this world, who didn't wear a layer of disguise to live their lives? Fujio placed the tablet down, smiling faintly as she stood up. The other students' voices seemed to have stopped. No one knew why a teacher from Class A was looking for a student from Class D. Yang brought Fujio into the office, pointing to the skateboard at the side. This should be yours, right? Fujio glanced over as though she was confirming. It looks like mine, but mine has my name on it, it's not here. Yang narrowed his eyes. Is that so? If you're interested, I can bring it to you. My skateboard is in the classroom. How could Fujio be her skateboard? However, just as she expected, this young guy was very smart. He even used the skateboard to confirm whether the person who appeared in the corridor yesterday was her. If it was so easy to be discovered by the other party, she wouldn't have to be a hacker anymore. The student surnamed Yang looked at the student in front of him again. He knew a little about Fujio. In reality, this sentence was nonsense. The person who used to be the biggest drag on the school had somehow become the most handsome guy in the school. It could be said that it caused a sensation in the entire school. He had also seen the interview with the youngster. He didn't know why, but from the bottom of his heart, he didn't want to have more contact with this young man. However, the appearance of this skateboard yesterday made him pay attention to it. Chapter 551. How could someone as smart as Fujio not hear the threat in his words? However, it was clear that Teacher Yang had misunderstood her position. She hated being threatened the most. Teacher is right. It's better to be a simple student. When the youth said this, his voice was very slow. Yang Ming didn't know why, but he was always on guard against him. Obviously, the other party was just a high school student. So what if he was popular? When the time came, he would have the final say on the exam papers. Since it's not your board, go back. Also, help me ask who this thing belongs to. All right. Fujio had never been one to reveal her own danger in front of such people. This was hacking. They would always move in the dark. The moment Li Mengran heard that the youngster had been called over by Yang Ming, she rushed to Class D. When she didn't see Fujio, her eyes wavered. Shui Yaoyao saw that she was in a bad condition and reached out to hold her. Mengran, what's wrong? Your Highness Jiu really went to Teacher Yang's office. Li Mengran's face was filled with unprecedented fear. Shui Yaoyao nodded. His hand was pulled away. Yao, we must go to save him. Teacher Yang must have found out the person who appeared there yesterday is... Before Li Mengran could finish her sentence, the youth's light laughter came from behind her. Mengran, why are you here? Li Mengran turned around, heaving a sigh of relief when she saw that the person was fine. Noticing that many students were looking at her, she forced a smile. I am here to look for Yao. If you want to find me, then so be it. If you want to find me, don't use Yao as an excuse. Fujio stuffed one hand into her pocket, wearing her school jacket over her pure white shirt. She reached out and knocked Li Mengran's head, her actions so intimate that it seemed like she was doing it for everyone to see. Silly girl. Before Li Mengran could understand what was going on, the young man bent down and held her in his arms. His voice was soft. Are you ready to agree? What? Li Mengran felt her ears going numb, her feet felt like they were stepping on cotton. The youngster's lips curled up into a smile, like the sunlight slanting out. Of course it's to be my girlfriend. Girlfriend. Instantly. The inside and outside of the classroom looked like it had been bombed by an atomic bomb. The girls covered their lips with their hands. The boys banged the wooden table loudly as if they were cheering for Fujio. In short, girlfriend? His Highness Gyo was actually going to get a girlfriend. Moreover, His Highness Gyo had taken the initiative to pursue someone else. Oh no. They could not accept this cruel news. Many girls' hearts were about to break. The male students were very happy. Especially those from Class D, they knew that as long as Fujio was around, they would never be able to stand out. In short, they had already lost all hope in this world that only cared about appearances and not strength. Think about it. When a guy without a girlfriend confesses to a girl, the girl he likes shyly tells him, "It's not that you're not good enough, it's just that I already have someone I like." Who is it? Who was that person? I want to know. I won't tell you. As the girl said so, she glanced at the silver-haired youth sitting behind her. Did she think he was an idiot? You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.